be here. Appreciate your giving us the opportunity to speak and talk about Neola very briefly. I'm not going to be long, but I just wanted to give you an overview. My experience, my name is Tom Whitmer. I live in Alachua County. I was a staff attorney and school board, assistant school board attorney in Alachua County and in Pinellas County. And that's my experience. I've been with Neola for probably 10 years. I also have a ancestor who was named after Henry Clay, so that's not that common.
He had to say that.
Annette, do you want to say?
And my name's Annette Martinson. I'm a career educator. I started out as an exceptional education teacher. I was a principal for 20 years, and then I retired from Volusia County Schools as area superintendent. But I spent the majority of my career in Monroe County. So we're glad to be here, and I'll turn it back over to Tom.
Neola is a policy services company. We have a large presence in Florida. You can see on the map that we passed out. We're located everywhere between Escambia and Monroe counties. And our populations go from 1,000 students to 350,000 students. So you may want to, I don't know where you are in wanting to do this, but some boards want, it's a good idea to review your policy manual periodically. It's just a very difficult thing to do in light of everything else that's going on. But some policies might be inconsistent or duplicative. They might mix policy and procedure, or they might be about more than one subject. They might be out of date and not in compliance with federal or state law or regulations. And it's a difficult thing to keep all this going. The other thing is you may not have policies right now that are necessary to have, because we've had to add new subjects for policy making. And but few administrations can do this and keep the system going at the same time. So it really is good. Neola, it's all we do. We create and develop policies and keep them up to date and maintain them for these districts. Now, Neola has a series of templates for its policies. The templates are just a starting point. It's about they're about every subject you can imagine, hundreds of them, but they are a beginning point only. They have options in the templates for choices about which way you want to go on a certain issue. Sometimes they have different versions of the same template. So they are intended to be a starting point, not a substitution for any of your policies. And we would work from both your policies and the templates to come up with a unique policy for your district. If I could take just a minute to describe what the policy project would involve. It is a collaborative effort. Neola would work with the staff of the district. There would first be an orientation meeting where the district staff would become acquainted with the Neola people, and there would be a team leader. The superintendent would appoint a person who would be the primary contact with Neola to sort of manage the project, keep all the cats herded in the right direction. We would have a meeting and try to establish a timeline early in the project. The timeline could be anywhere from 8 months, would be probably the minimum, to it could be 3 or more years. We've had some districts go for that long a period of time, but it's better to keep it less than that. And we would have training sessions also with the staff to teach them how to use board docs. Board docs is the platform that Neola maintains the policies on. The purpose of using board docs is that's where you can access the policy drafts, you can edit them, you can share them, and the staff would be using that platform for the development of the policies. So there would be a training session. And then after that, we would begin what we call a drafting process, where Neola would come to the district, meet with the team, and review the different policy options for all the entire policies. That's what takes the time to do and the effort. Takes a lot of staff time too. And then during that, as it evolves, the superintendent and the staff would make decisions about what they want to recommend to the board in the way of policies. It could end up where it is your current policy. That happens many times. It also could be that you choose to go with something like the Neola template, or one version of it. Or it could be a combination of your policy and the template, or it could be something entirely different, a whole new, different policy that you created with our help for this district. I would like to say that policies in this process are developed together. It's that you see the policy in the context of the whole chapter or the whole subject across different policies. And so you may, in that way you can avoid conflicts and tensions between policies. You can have everything aligned together. And that's what we strive to do, is have all the policies aligned with the same subject. Neola will advise which policies are required and which are optional. The second phase of the workshop, after the drafting or near the end of the drafting, is the workshops. We would have, I anticipate, a series of workshops with the board to review the preliminary drafts of the policies before they're final, for input from the board, and there would be an opportunity for the board to review all the policies and to make suggestions and ask questions to get explanations. The first workshop is normally the bylaws. That's the chapter that deals with the regulation by the board of itself, how it conducts meetings, how it establishes priorities, its communications, procedures, things like that. Those are all, there's a great number of bylaws, and we would take those up with the board early in the project because the staff won't be working on those. That goes straight to the board. You see the templates and discussion and make sure. Some boards can do all the bylaws in one session of 3 hours. Some boards take several months at it, but it can be done, and it's not that difficult. For the other chapters, we would break them down into bite-sized chunks that would be manageable, where the board could absorb the quantity of material that's coming in. Usually, we do the personnel in one workshop, operations and safety and facilities in another one, curriculum and students perhaps in another one. So there'll be different chapters and different subjects of the workshops. The involvement of the attorney is certainly welcome, and some attorneys like to be involved before the policies go to the board. Other attorneys want to wait until the workshop and then make comments and suggestions at that time. And then after the workshop, there may be other further revisions and changes to the policies. And the next phase is the adoption. And once the policies are finalized, they would be submitted for adoption through the APA. And I don't know, probably have a hearing for public input. At the end of that, Neola recommends that the board have one vote to both adopt the entire group of new policies at one time and rescind all the old policies. So you're never without a policy manual. And it can be done any time of the year. It's certainly great to have it done before the beginning of the school year, but it's whatever works out. And then at the end of all this, you have reviewed the policy manual completely, and you have an up-to-date set of policies. Neola will post them on the Board Docs platform. They'll be accessible to you and the public. And they will have links. There will be keyword searchable, and they have links to the other policies that are referenced and to statutes and regulations that are the authorities for the policy. The final phase of the project, well, there's really never a final phase, but because policy never stops, but the next phase of the initial project would be to develop procedures, administrative procedures, which normally don't get adopted by the board but come from the superintendent. And I would say that in our experience, the procedures are really just as important as the policies. That's where the rubber hits the road. The procedures are the directions and instructions, the internal communications from the superintendent to the staff about how to do their job to implement the policies. And it's very valuable in two respects. The first one is for training. These would be great training documents, and everybody could be on the same page about what the responsibilities are of the job and have it in a clear way, rather than have memorandums and emails and different notes that have been taken over the years, spread out all over and not organized. The second reason the procedures are good is that they're a good defense to the allegations of discrimination and disparate treatment. Because if everybody is working from the same set of procedures, then you're more likely to not be accused of disparate treatment and discrimination, to people treating people differently instead of employees simply doing what they want on their own from situation to situation in an ad hoc way. After the initial project, Neola has a continuing role, policies. It's not something that ever really gets finished. Neola would publish on the website the policies and the procedures. Using multiple servers, these are available all the time on the internet. There would be regular updates twice a year based on new legislation, new court decisions, regulations, or based on best practices from Neola's other clients. We're constantly reviewing to come up with suggestions for best practices, and that's important too. These updates are developed in collaboration with our Florida attorneys, Sniffen and Spellman in Tallahassee, and they're involved with it, so it is legally compliant. The updates may include a legal alert about some issue of importance, such as new Title IX regulations or the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, the public comment at workshops, or the evidentiary standard in student discipline cases. Those are just some of them that we've had recently. And this is just be informational, the legal alert to explain some new issue that's come out and how it might impact how the policies get implemented. So the updates are presented, and then Neola staff will visit the district and meet with the staff to help with the update, explain it, and everything, and then the staff would enter the update into the policies, and Neola, once it's adopted, then Neola would put it on the internet. And we also have special updates for special issues that come out throughout the year. We've had several of them every year almost. These are on an as-needed basis with recommendations about changes of policy, but those are not the regular updates. I just want to reiterate that Neola is to assist the district in writing its policies. It's the district's policies, Neola doesn't come and impose anything on the district. We are a resource. And I don't know if Neola is being considered, but I would certainly welcome it. We would love to help you out.
Can I just throw at you? I'm more the operations person, and he's the lawyer. But we need done, we know we do. But for Neola, I was a principal when I got involved with Neola, and my district went to Neola. And so I did it on the side where you all are sitting. I was sitting there going, oh my gosh. And so what's so nice about Neola as from a district perspective is that, like last July, we updated 80 policies. So between last July and now, how many policies have you all updated? And And it's very important that you do not do that in isolation, because that's how things get out of whack. And that's the beauty from area superintendent's point of view, is that I know that everything has been vetted by the state statutes, by the feds, and I know that everything is legal. And we can make, a template can be much more reserved, or they can be loosened, but it's based on what you all want, and I like that. I'm from Volusia. We have a very population that wants things a certain way, and that's what I liked about Neola, respects that. This is some non-negotiables. If you go with Neola, you have to come over to our numbers, our numbering system, because that's how we update things. We can't have, a bunch of different numbers. That's a non-negotiable. How we get started is like, how do you eat this elephant? One bite at a time. And what we do is we do a codification. We have all of your policies, and we run them against the templates. Then the team leader can then start assigning them to different staff members, and so that they can start writing, writing policies to bring them to you, because this is your job. This whole policy nut is your job. And we make it so that it's very easy to eat that elephant one bite at a time, but policy review and adoption is never over. So that's what I say when I come to district. I said, how many policies have you looked at? If you're not looking at them regularly, and you're probably, your manual is out of date. And there have been so many changes, we've got to keep up with that, because that protects our staffs and it protects our students. So those are just a few of the big items. Because I just heard this, I've not looked at it, but let's say you want your policy on book adoption. You love that policy. We just put our number on your policy, and then your attorneys will vet it, because then we wouldn't, for lack of better words, insure it any longer. It'd be your attorneys that insure, because all of our policies are vetted. So if your people if someone goes up against it, our people are going to work with your people on it, because we make sure that it's by the feds and by the state is legal. So those are just a few of the operations person wanted to mention that to you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my card with each one of you, and this is how we work. I live in Volusia County. And I'm available. So if you want to call me and say, Annette, I'm from Clay County, I have this question, call me. The only reason I wouldn't get back with you right away is if I'm with a group of people. Tom and I have been out for a week in districts. And what I would say to you also is, like, one of your school board members, she goes, hey, I called Escambia and asked talk to the people who work with us, because that's how we advertise. I mean, most of the people call us, and we come in and we work very closely with you. And the first one is, he didn't really hit that hard enough for me, is bylaws. It's good to do that right out of the box, and I'll tell you why. Then you all learn real quick what your staff members are going through, because you've got to read it, you've got to divulge it, and you may say, no, that's not for us. Okay, fine, we want ours. And we just put the number on it, but it's a good session right away after we do the training to do. And then you will, you'll appreciate what they're going through a little bit more. Okay, and yes.
I have a question. I want to make sure I heard this right. So you guys essentially would take over our website where our policies are. You would you restructure that and
see, I don't know what system do you guys use right now? We don't.
Not really.
Okay. Well, we use, all of our information is on board docs. So, and I'm not a techie. I mean, I'm a fake techie, but I don't know this. Like, I don't know if we can put a link on your website.
Some districts have taken their policies off of board docs and have it on their own link. Yes.
Well, my question is ours is, I know that there was some frustration with us as board, well, a few of us as board members that you can't find a policy, you can't even find the policies. They're not set up accurately, they're very confusing, and I guess our challenge would be, would you guys, when adopting your Word doc or whatever, would you then make it to where it's like other counties, nice and neat, and if you need...
Oh yes,
I didn't know if you did that.
We have what we call our cleaners.
cleaners.
So like after let's just say your bylaws, we work on the bylaws, we change some words, we mark things off, Before they go, we will send them to our production department. They clean them, format them, everything. And then we have different sections, like 1,000s is administrations, 2,000s, programs, 3,000s teachers, 4,000 support. So it's all laid out that way. And like all you have to do is there's a search bar, and you would type in some keywords, and it's going to pull up every policy that has those words in them. You know,
That's what I did in a-
we have a meta search, and I mean, like, I just was with a county last week, and they go, now we need a new bereavement policy. So, I mean, I'm like, oh, okay. I just clicked the meta box, which you would have, and put the word bereavement, and I got 90 policies. And so I pulled them, printed them, and I met with them, and we actually, you know, picked a little from each one, and we created a policy, and now they've got to go through the process. You've got to advertise, there's a 28-day process, that whole process that you do, but we will guide you, you know, through that. But so no, it's invaluable.
And at our last board meeting, I gave you guys a copy of just the 5,000 section. Do you remember when I handed you that? We don't have a student section, so I was amazed that we didn't, but I handed it to you, and there was like 130 different policies based on students. And you can go to any county that you want. The minute you click on their policies, you're like, Neola, not. Neola, not. Because when searching for library media policies, examples of them, there's a distinct difference on how to find it. It was super easy for me to find parental rights documents in Neola, to find the book policies in Neola, but on other websites without it, it was unorganized. I mean, literally sometimes I would search for an hour trying to find a county's media policy. So I'm going to be honest and upfront, I was never a fan of Neola. I'm not really sure why.
That's
You know, I
okay.
might have my personal reasons why. However, when I started actually becoming a board member and having to research policies, I realized the positive impact it could have
Saves a lot of time.
on us as board members.
Saves a lot of, and it saves time for staff, it saves time for everyone. What I would say is another benefit for me, because when I do a meta search, I'm looking at every district. So you all, when it's a Neola district, you know how to go on, you can search, you can pull up all kinds of information. So you all are busy people, I respect that. I'm going to leave my card, I'm going to leave them with the secretary, you hand them out. If you have any questions after the fact, give me a call, give Tom a call. But where we would start is right out of the box, training staff, and then we come right to you, we get on those bylaws. And I would recommend if you want to get this done in the school year, we really try to do that bylaw meeting with you before, before July.
Is that a public meeting on that?
You know what, they're a workshop. How do you all handle workshops here? Do everything in Yeah, so, and it's, and then we would, meet with the staff next. And, so we look forward to the opportunity.
Thank you both very much.
Okay,
We
thank
appreciate
you.
All right, next on, yes, Sam, did you have
No, I was just gonna say if anyone had any questions. We're not staying, but. I know, it's my principle.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is a presentation from Penda.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. So you know that one of the things that we started doing was giving a presentation about computer programs. Last board workshop, you saw one on iReady math by Govinda Poor. This is one on science by Katie Rellis that's going to give a brief presentation. For each one of these programs, what we found is bringing information to the board is helpful so that you can understand the number of minutes that these programs are used and the impact on students. And so without further ado, Katie, go right ahead.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. My name is Katie Relas. I am the K-12 Science Curriculum Specialist here in the district. Before I took over this role, I was a high school science teacher, taught everything from physical science, biology, chemistry, the range. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about what our science program in the district looks like, and then how Penda kind of plays into our instructional practice. So first of all, I want to take a minute and just recognize our students and teachers because they are performing amazingly well. Our 5th grade students sit and take a statewide science assessment at the end of every year, and on that assessment they are tested on benchmarks that began in 3rd grade and continued in 4th grade into 5th grade. Our district had an average scale score last year of 206 compared to the state average of 199, and our district ranked 6th for our 5th grade science scores. Our 8th graders also take a test that covers benchmarks that begin in 6th grade, move into 7th grade and 8th grade, and their average scale score was a 205 compared to the state average of 198, and we ranked 5th across the state for all the districts. Biology, they are just, all the content is covered in 1 year, and they had an average scale score this year of 411 compared to the state average of 403, which put us at number 7 in the state. We're very, very proud of our teachers and students. A number 4 ranking overall across all the states. For all of our science students, they are doing amazingly well, and that is particularly impressive if you consider what they have going into the test. So our 3rd grade, like I said, it covers 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. It's tested in 5th. 3rd grade has 25 original benchmarks, and then 4th grade has 35 original benchmarks. They don't necessarily grow from the 3rd grade ones. They're totally different. And then 5th grade has 35. So our 5th grade teachers have to teach 35 original benchmarks and also go back and review 60 benchmarks that they covered in the 2 previous years. Our 8th grade students, similarly, in 6th grade they have 27 benchmarks, 7th grade is 33, and then our 8th grade teachers teach 34 benchmarks in addition to the 60 benchmarks they have to review from the 2 previous years. And then while biology is only 1 year of content, there are 54 brand new original benchmarks that they have to cover between August and April, and they sit for their test in May. So considering just the sheer quantity of information that our students have to just really comprehend, because it's not just a vocabulary test where they can answer questions, they're doing amazingly well. So a little bit about how our teachers teach science in our district and state and nationwide. Best practice for science teachers is using the 5E instructional model. If you have ever taught science, you probably have seen this before. If you have not, I'll give you a brief review. Basically, we start by engaging our students in science. We want them to pull in background knowledge or just get curious about the topic. And then we allow our students to explore, because the students should always have some kind of science experience in order to attach the content to. And then we go into the explain portion where the students explain to us, and then we fill in the blanks and move forward into the elaborate, where we sort of go back and remediate for students who need some additional scaffolding, or we extend for our students who are getting it and they need more of a challenge. And then we always evaluate to see where our students are. And the evaluate is written at the end, but we really do it all the way throughout. This is an actual toolbox that we provide to our teachers when they are creating instruction for our students. And there's lists of different activities that they can do at each level, each one of these 5Es. Since we are going to talk about Penda today, you'll notice that Penda is not necessarily written in the engage or the explore. It does have a place for the explain, where the students can start gathering content knowledge, and then again a little bit at the elaborate. So it is, Penda is a very valuable tool for our students and teachers, but is not necessarily a daily lesson plan in any format. So let's talk a little bit about what Penda actually is. It is a supplemental resource. We use it in addition to a variety of other things, our curriculum guides, our textbooks, hands-on experiences, digital simulations. Okay? It's a support for small groups. There's a way to use Penda to assign to small groups and individual students. It's a support for our ESE and ELL students, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like in just a minute. It's hugely beneficial. And it does provide quick checks for understanding. Penda is not an independent computer instruction. The kids don't just pull it up and teach themselves science. It's not a full class lesson plan. In fact, if you sat down to teach one benchmark, even if you assigned every Penda lesson on that benchmark, it probably, especially in junior high and high school, wouldn't fill a 50-minute class period. And it's not a daily lesson plan. In that 5E model, as I pointed out, there's not Penda every day. So this is kind of what a Penda lesson looks like on the screen for our students when they are introducing a topic. So Penda provides content in the form of activities for every single benchmark that we instruct on grades 3 through biology. So this is an example of a 4th grade lesson format. So this is something that has been assigned to students. You'll see that there's 3 different levels on the same topic. So we have developing, achieving, exceeding, and then we do have a mini assessment for every single benchmark. So the science content is the same in all 3 of these levels, and it was written, the really unique thing about Penda is it's written in Florida using Florida benchmarks, which is hugely different than even our textbooks, which are written using national standards and then crosswalked back to try to match Florida. So this is, if you're looking at the benchmarks, this is better content for our students than even our textbook necessarily provides. So Penda has a developing lesson, achieving lesson, exceeding lesson. Like I said, the science content is the same. The only things that are different are the readability. So the students, it gets a little bit more difficult for them to read as they go up from developing to achieving to exceeding. And also the tests, the questions, the checks for understanding throughout each lesson get a little bit more difficult. By the time they hit exceeding, there is a short response answer that the students have to respond to, whereas developing is mostly just multiple choice or drag and drop type information. And then, as I said, every benchmark has a mini assessment. There are 5 questions on that mini assessment. So it's, and they came from Scantron, so they've been highly vetted. They've been analyzed over many years and given to many students, so they know that they're quality questions. So as I said earlier, we do use digital lab simulations for our students. A lot of times either we don't have the supplies to do certain things, like if we're doing speed or forces in motion, we don't necessarily have all the means to create these elaborate setups to have students analyze data. So that's where these digital lab simulations come into play. And these lab simulations are embedded in the Penda platform. So the students can just go to Penda, which they know how to access, and they can pull that, and teachers can walk them through the lab simulation in order to get the data to analyze so that they can move forward from there. Penda has an immersive reader, and this is a single screenshot. This is not 2 screenshots side by side. Okay, so when the students enter into the immersive reader option on their computer, it pulls up the immersive reader side by side with their current screen. And so I've done a couple of different things with this because it supports both ELL and ESC students. It translates into over 100 languages, and it will read it verbally to the students in most of those languages. There are a few dialect languages that they can't verbalize. And then it also will do reading support for our students. So you'll notice on this particular one, the words are spread out, so it's easier for students to identify letters individually. It'll do line focus, so it'll just highlight one line at a time, and then it will also read it in English to our students. You can change the background color and the font and many other things, whatever works best for our students. It's very similar to the accommodations they get on state testing, and so it's something that they're used to being able to do. And when you toggle to the next screen, it stays up there and just rotates with them. And I do want to point out, Penda has been extremely responsive to us when we ask for things or we tell them certain things aren't working. This is an example of that. It used to be that when you went into immersive reader, it took up the whole screen, and then you'd have to toggle back to the original screen and then come back. And we said this is really difficult for our students. And also, with over 1,400 ELL students in our county now, we really need to be able to show them the English and their language side by side to support their English development. And so this was a recent update that they made to their platform so that we can see those 2 things side by side, and the students can better understand the English and their language. So Penda is also able to be assigned either to a whole class, or you can create small groups, or you can assign a lesson to an individual student depending on student need. I went in, you may recognize this name of this teacher. Ron Campbell is our district teacher of the year. I went in and pulled up a picture of her small groups that she has. She's an amazing science teacher at Wilkinson Junior High. And you'll notice that she's created small groups and assigned lessons accordingly. This becomes especially helpful when you get towards the end of the year, and keep in mind those 5th grade teachers and those 8th grade teachers are reviewing 3 years worth of material. And Penda is really the best option for them to be able to access the previous year's information. So if we want to see how much did our 5th grade students remember from 3rd and 4th grade, you can give them a mini assessment, see where they are, assign lessons according to benchmarks where we have need. So we don't, in 5th grade, we don't have 3rd and 4th grade textbooks sitting there for them to access, but we do have Penda where they can go back. Same thing with 8th grade, they can go back to those 6th and 7th grade standards and access that information really easily. So we, a couple years ago when we were analyzing Penda's support of our students in the classroom, so we kind of looked at how our Penda users were doing compared to the state and compared to our non-Penda users. When we talk to teachers and we provide training for them on how Penda is best used in the classroom, we kind of have a 3-pronged approach. We ask them to complete 2 to 3 activities per week, and at the very beginning, the slide that had the developing, achieving, exceeding, each one of those is an activity. So essentially, we're asking them to cover 1 benchmark a week. So complete 2 to 3 activities per week, reach 80% mastery on those activities. And Penda did do something this year that was extremely beneficial, and you can toggle on a require mastery switch. So the students can't move from developing to achieving without hitting that 80% goal. And then same thing from achieving to exceeding, you can't move on without hitting that 80% goal. And the third thing that we've asked teachers to do is make sure they have a written component with the students. So if they're on Penda and they have a computer in front of them, they should also have notes next to them that they are actively taking while they are going through this process. So in this particular example, this was our 5th grade scores, I think from 2 years ago. Our Penda users had an average scale score of 210. You'll notice that the level 4 achievement is 215, so they're creeping up on that level 4 understanding of science. And this is a comparison of how many of their activities compared to the scale score. So if they mastered 100 activities that year, they were a level 5 student, or almost, which is really impressive, again, considering that's 94 benchmarks. And then when we look at our 8th grade, you'll see that there's a similar relationship. So our Penda users had an average scale score of 213, which again is almost that level 4. And if they mastered 50 activities or more, they were essentially a level 5 student, again, on those 94 benchmarks over 3 years. And then also have the same information for our biology students. Our Penda users averaged 417, and then if they mastered over 100 activities, they also were a level 5 student on biology, and that's again 54 benchmarks that they learned in one single school year. So I do want to show just this information came directly from the Penda platform. This is this year's usage. So I pulled all of the usage from August until the middle of February. And we have just shy of 20,000 students that are actively using Penda in our district. And this is the average number of minutes they spent per week. Again, you can see the average score. Our students are hitting that 80% mastery like we're asking them to. And in elementary is the highest amount of usage, which is about 16 minutes, moving down to junior high average is about 11 minutes per week. Again, this is per week. And then 8 minutes in high school, for an overall total of about district-wide 12 minutes per student. So I did break it down even further by grade level, and you'll see that in 5th grade they do have the highest usage, about 24 minutes. But again, this is the only platform that they really have to be able to access those 3rd and 4th grade standards that they are being tested on at the end of the year. And you'll notice that as they get up further into like 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, the usage kind of dips off. When you hit junior high and high school, you really start getting content specialists in the classroom, and a lot of them have been teaching for many years, and they have a lot of really solid instructional practice on how they present to their students. And at no time has the district said, you must use Penda. It's highly recommended, and it's an extremely beneficial platform for our students to use, and many of our experienced teachers do use it, but they don't all necessarily need it. And so that's kind of where they taper down as you get into the older grades. But again, 5th grade, a lot of times in 5th grade, you start having a much larger chunk of time set aside for science in 5th grade. So in 5th grade, often they have 60 to 90 minutes per day to cover science. So if you're looking at 24 minutes a week, that's still only 1/10 of the time that they're spending on Penda in the classroom. So the last thing that we did is we did ask teachers how they felt about Penda. Did they think it was useful? How are they using it? So one of the questions that we asked them is if they feel like Penda is providing a necessary support for science instruction beyond the textbook and the curriculum guide. 78% of the teachers just said yes. About 15% of them said no. And again, we do have those content specialists that don't necessarily need the support of Penda. And of the ones that felt the need to give us a detailed response, about 5% of them essentially said, yes, we need Penda. So that's 83% of our teachers that are asking, that say that Penda is providing a necessary support to them in the classroom. And then we asked them, what is your recommendation for moving forward for the 24-25 school year? Again, 76% of our teachers said that they would love to keep Penda. About 8% of them say we don't need a program at all. And again, the ones that provide us their very detailed responses, about 7% of them also said we essentially want to keep Penda.
And
so once again, that is, we sent a survey out to, yes, 3rd grade through 10th grade, anybody who has students who are on Penda. So about 83% of the teachers say that they want Penda for the 24-25 school year. So that was pretty much everything I've got. So questions, yes?
Having been a 5th grade science teacher,
Sure.
I wish that I had. We've had Penda for a couple of years, is that correct?
I believe this is our 3rd year. Yes.
Okay, got it. Question about the 5th grade.
Sure.
And the timing. And more of a procedural question. Let's say I'm a student and I'm in group work, obviously, in my science class, and I've got 4 groups doing different things, and this group is assigned to the computer at this point to do Penda. You've got this amount of time, and I don't finish my whatever I'm doing on Penda at that time, that particular standard. But it's time to switch groups, and this group is now coming to me, and this group is going over here and doing a lab and whatever.
Right.
Does the work that I've accomplished hold over?
It does.
To the next step?
Yes.
I mean,
So
I
when
can
you
go back and I can just pick it up again?
Yes, ma'am. When you go, when you leave the Penda platform, when you log back in, it has the you want to continue.
Got it.
And you just click on it, it takes you right back to the
So it
screen you left
continues.
off on.
And I love the differentiated instruction.
Yes.
Whoa, because kids, and I'm thinking elementary, and well, it can happen in upper grades as well, but the differentiated instruction of being able to start with something a little bit more simple and be tested on that and realize, yes, I do know that, and now I can move on to the next level, and
Yes.
I can achieve, just like the smart kid next to me achieved.
And quite often we have our teachers, especially in elementary, do that developing lesson whole group, so they present it to their whole class, and the students work their way through it, and then we have them go in and just answer those questions, and so they get that immediate win, and they think, I can do science, I like science, and they move on to that next level, and they are doing a great job, they're achieving.
And just for historical perspective, when we did, at the time that I left the classroom, we were still doing FCAT science. But the other subjects were completely different, right? I mean, they were in all of the new testing.
Yes.
The math and the language arts. But with that FCAT science, we used to literally have a folder with, okay, these are all of the 3rd through 5th grade standards. And if you want to do a refresher, you can start, okay, FCAT was in May or April usually. And if you start in January, February, and you start reviewing all of this, then then the kids will be up to date when they take that test.
Yeah. And we have worked really hard
That's amazing.
with teachers and our curriculum to make sure we try to embed a lot of the 3rd and 4th grade standards throughout the year. But it's a monumental feat to have your students test on 94 standards.
And if I'd seen
phenomenal
it
that they're
before,
doing
then I
as well as
probably
they
would
are.
have thought.
They're really doing great.
Are there tests at the end that they can like practice for, I may have missed this, but practice for like the fast test and all that
Yes,
stuff?
so we have, so our district has baseline assessments, so all our students, there's a test available for 3rd through biology, a baseline assessment, a mid-year assessment, and then our tested subject areas have what we call a mock assessment. So sometime between March and April, the students will take a practice test and they'll get it. It'll look just like their test will through Synergy, and the teachers can pull that data and start using that to go through the remediation process. Penda also does provide SSA practice tests, so a lot of teachers will give our mock, and then they'll go through the review and remediation, and then they'll give the Penda practice test so that the students can see where they've had growth on the different benchmarks and what they still need to study before they take the test.
So I did use Penda.
Sure.
I was a 6th grade elementary teacher, because you have to teach more than one subject down there. Yeah, it just happens that.
Quite often math and science, which
That's the way that works.
Which means you're then responsible for 2 tested areas, absolutely.
So this is, this is great, and I agree with you, when used in the right conditions, it's a wonderful program.
Sure.
But anecdotally, like if you experience this in a classroom, there's a couple of things, and I think maybe, Mr. Brodsky, this is really more procedural, that we really need to get a handle on it. But I'm going to give you some examples. So you can't finish any lesson in 11 minutes, so I'm not sure, like the time to me is not, the time on the computer doesn't match up with the actual correlation, I think, with time and achievement for me.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, I know for a fact that teachers use it for homework. I know because I had to help my granddaughter through a lesson that I missed a question on. It was so difficult. The reading level was very difficult. They were also using it as part of her grade. I mean, Penda became 15% of her grade. I can tell you, when I worked with 6th grade teachers, when we adopted the new textbook, that I know that the intent is not for them, because if you use Penda as an independent learning tool, and you said it's not an independent computer instruction,
Right.
it absolutely needs to be pre-taught. The lessons are really hard compared to what they need to know on the Florida-aligned testing, the FAST test.
Okay.
This year, maybe. So I think we have a procedure problem. People are signing up for homework. It doesn't differentiate reading levels like people think it does. So if you have a low-level reading kid, they're going to struggle on that independently without a teacher. So I don't know the 12 minutes or 10 minutes.
Well, I can.
I think we're using it
I think that's.
inappropriately.
I think that in some cases, some people probably do use it or misuse it the way they should. The actual number of minutes is actual fact, because that's taken from.
And using it for a grade when it's something they don't know how to do.
We could certainly provide information and training to people.
Because I don't want to just say that, you know, it's a terrible program because the kids are online, but I know that it is not managed the way that it should be in a lot of teachers' classrooms.
One of the dangers is, and one of the reasons why we started these presentations and also return on investment analysis, is simply because there are anecdotal examples in which people don't use it properly.
Well, I didn't see anything about how many minutes were at homework, how many minutes were used for class time, like.
That's total number of minutes taken right from the platform. So the minutes that you saw are fact. So not anecdotal information, it's taken right from the
Mr. Rossi, that
platform.
would include home use as well.
That would include any use.
Any use.
So I think the purpose to the graph was, I think the concern of the board at one meeting, previous meeting, was the amount of screen time. So that clearly demonstrates by fact the number of minutes that they've used, both home and at school, total number of minutes. And I think sometimes anecdotally, you'll hear information from people who use the program. Clearly, we're not saying that Penda is the be-all, end-all of science instruction. What Katie forgot to tell you is all the other stuff behind the scenes that's being used to make our district where we are currently in science, which is 4th in the state. Penda is a part of that, though, when it comes to the review process. If you're teaching in 5th grade, the standards 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, that's a lot to put on teachers. Or in 8th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So this is simply a tool, a supplemental resource for teachers. There are teachers that choose not to use it because they believe that their skills are honed and their capacity is such that they don't need to use it. You saw the graph in which 83% of teachers said, we like this program and want to continue on with this program. That would mean 17% didn't say that, and that's fine. When you have an organization as big as ours, you have teachers at various levels of capacity and ability, and therefore you have to provide a variety of resources in order to ensure that people are successful. So I would just kind of like say to the board that this is a piece of the overall program. Curriculum maps and what we do in other areas and how we embed standards across vertically across curriculum is a very big part of it. This is just one piece of it. And so in,
Are there rules though with it? I mean, rules like we don't use it for homework for a grade, for kids who struggle in science.
So-
we don't do independent, as you said, we don't use it as an independent tool for a grade.
We do have professional development that we have gone out to schools and we offer district-wide every year. And so we do offer certain guidance. I don't know that we can provide rules per se, because when it comes to individual teachers' classrooms, they have autonomy to
best practice.
to
We
do
used to
grades
have
and
rules.
and things like that. So we do offer suggestions in terms of best practices for Penda and the like. And we have, when we go out to schools or we have district-wide meetings and we discuss Penda, we do mention best practices and we practice with the teachers on how to do the different things and how to include the note-taking and all of those. And so we're, again, this is the 3rd year that we've had Penda, so we've been building capacity every single year. And also, a lot of times, especially in elementary school, the teachers get moved from grade level to grade level, and so sometimes you have somebody, this is the very first time they've had Penda, and especially if they're like a math science teacher, they're quite often going to math trainings instead of science trainings, which is totally fine and appropriate and great because the math is a huge part of it. So we just try to make sure we can get in there and support them as we can.
Yeah, well, I'm also, just to throw it out there, when, I believe in teacher autonomy, but if we were using this for homework and independent work, teacher autonomy never outweighs what's best for a child, so.
Yeah, we can provide additional guidance for folks. I think what Katie's trying to point out is that she's not going to be there to personally tell the teacher what to do that. You're going to provide best practices for those individuals and what the rules and guidance are related to it. Remember, that's anecdotally. The numbers, the facts, kind of show you the number of minutes that it's being used, the program. And so I think a lot of times there's misconceptions. We just want to provide some data to you related to each program.
Can we still get, I know I asked for this last time and I know it'll take some time, but can we get like a side-by-side screenshot of all of our programs that we use, Penda, iReady, all the things that we use in its screen time?
Well, I think.
And not just you can't include technology, I completely get that, but like what is actually academically utilized? That's what I would like to see. So we saw today an average, okay, great. I would like to see that next to iReady so we can total up the amount of screen time.
I think the only caution I would give you when reading that data is, like she said, there are gonna be classrooms that don't use one or the other. Like
Right.
maybe they have more of one than they do of the other, so I'm not sure that it would give us.
It would still give us a snapshot of an idea of what time kids are,
I think it would give us
it would
an
give us an
idea
average.
of what the district is recommending for use, right?
Right.
But I'm not sure if it would give us an accurate reading on what screen time actually looks like for individual students, if that makes sense. in
Right,
classes.
but we would have a screenshot of
District recommendation.
what we're looking at, you're right.
Well,
And it's gonna vary each semester, it's gonna
Right.
vary each week, it's gonna, you know, like if we're out of school, if we're not in school, you know, I get that. But I just wanna see like just a picture of what we have.
And if I could ask another quick question related to that, those were average numbers of minutes per week, if I'm not mistaken. And each week is going to be incredibly different as well. Because some weeks you're going to, I mean, leading up to the FAST test, oh my gosh, the review time is going to be different than at the beginning of the year when you're establishing your routines. And it's basically when, let's say if I'm the math science teacher and I use iReady for math and I use Penda for science, it may happen on the same day. Because today we're on Wednesday, we've already gone through the general introductions of everything on Monday. Tuesday, we're doing perhaps a lab or something. Wednesday, we're now getting into the meat of it, and you're going to be practicing on your own a little bit more, and part of that's going to be a group rotation. So in math, I'm doing a group rotation, and they're getting iReady. In science, they're doing a group rotation, and they get Penda. So that day, I mean, I could hear one of my grandsons coming home saying, I'm on the computer all day. You know what I'm saying?
I think
But
what
she was able to pull the
that's a different
average.
check.
I think what
Right,
Ms.
what I'm
Skipper is
saying.
saying is that so far, we've seen the math program, and we've seen the science program,
We haven't seen
and
that.
I know you hate this anecdotal stuff, but I'm gonna tell you, that's telling me that kids are only on a computer less than 40 minutes a week. If so, why do we have so much technology? I think she wants to know, is there a limit? What are they using the Chromebooks for? Why do we have so many? And how much time are students spending weekly is what I think Ms. Skipper's saying. Because so far, we've covered two of the main curricula, and we have hardly any minutes being used. So I understand where she's coming from.
Yeah, we can certainly look to provide a visual representation of what that would look like. And to Ms. Gilhousen's point, based on an average, it's not going to look the same each week, each grade level for each student, but it at least would give you a visual representation.
But today you just showed us an average, a total average.
Yes.
And then you broke it down into grade levels and stuff like that. Did you just pick a random week, or was that just an average overall?
I took the total hours that were on the computer year to date. So they give me a running total
So
for
that's what I
August
would
to
like,
today.
a year to date,
Yeah.
screenshot side by side, which would be the average that I'm looking for. That's what I as a board member would like to see.
I mean, do we have a limit? I mean, how much time do our kids spend on the computer? I mean, according to this, we're spending no time at all.
Yeah, we can certainly provide that information. You know, I think what we want to point out is just the total number of minutes versus the number of minutes of instruction, and kind of show you the difference there. It's
Because-
important, like in this particular case, when you see the average number of minutes, remember, students are being assessed on a platform like this. To not have students practice that would be malpractice in the process. So there is an appropriate amount of time, and where that balance is, we can certainly give you that visual representation.
That's all I want. I just want to see where we stand visually.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Katie.
You lost me when you talked about chemistry. Can't imagine that Penda's used a lot of physics, you know?
Yes, so they got blocked out.
We weren't allowed to take physics.
Are we ready to?
Yes, the next item is the review of the draft of challenge policy.
Okay, so I'm excited to introduce this. So,
Mr. Brodsky,
We're leaving.
I hate to ask you, because
Sure.
I'm not anybody in this meeting, but I've been on grad night buses that were warmer than this room.
oh, I can tell you. Madam Chair, can we maybe take a couple-minute recess? Looks like everybody's got to go to the bathroom.
At this time, we will hear a presentation on the draft of the book challenge process. Mr. Rossi.
Sure, yes, if I could, let me just give an introduction to this. You know, first of all, nothing has elicited more passion than this particular topic of books, and I get it. And everybody has a different idea on how this should be handled. And book challenge is something that's been around from the beginning of time. I remember when my friend Flicka was challenged in Clay County. The Harry Potter series was challenged. But now we've entered kind of a new phase. And the new phase is that a great many challenges come. And so the board has had policy revisions, one in April, and now we're looking at another one. And the proposal here today is just simply that. It's a proposal. It's a place to have a discussion, to make the changes that need to be changed so that the board, by consensus, has a vision moving forward on this particular issue. So I know that Jennifer Collins and Cindy Johnson have worked very hard. Ms. Hanson has been a leader on this particular issue and has worked very hard, very passionately towards this. So while everyone may not agree on certain pieces of this, right, because it's kind of complex and how this works, what I am asking for is that we allow the presentation to occur first, right? We go through the whole thing, and so you can kind of see the whole thing at one time. And then we go back to the beginning and start to dissect piece by piece. Because sometimes what happens is in a presentation, if the presentation gets stopped or it's disjointed, you don't see the whole thing. So if you see the whole thing first, and then you come back to part one and kind of work your way through it, you'll see how the pieces are interconnected. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Collins.
Good morning, board members and Mr. Rossi.
Good morning.
So we are so excited to be here with you this morning to share the proposed draft of the school, the challenge materials policy on library books. And so again, like Mr. Brodsky said, we've had a lot of time to collaborate with Mrs. Hanson, and we're very thankful for her input that she's provided. And so we are going to present, like Mr. Brodsky said, the information, and then we'll have the discussion. Obviously, you'll have the discussion and you'll lead that, and we'll be able to answer any questions, I know, along with Mr. Brodsky or anybody else in the room that we would need to talk to about this. So thank you for your time this morning. So you have a folder with some materials in it, and so we'll start with the first document, and that is the policy draft. And this is what Mrs. Hanson was referencing earlier with the 3.25 pages. I know when we first kind of started and she was talking to different people, it was a lot longer. And so Mrs. Hanson has done a lot of work seeking input and feedback to get this along with the support and collaboration of us at the district level. So if you kind of look at the different parts here, I'm obviously not going to read it to you, but I'll kind of just highlight some of the things. So first, the introduction just kind of sets the tone for the policy and why we are doing this, and really focusing on that informed consent with parents being able to choose. And what we really are looking at is that access level to the library for their students who are checking out those books. So it also, in the introduction part, talks about the challenges to titles that have the mature themes and how they would not be removed from the collections, but they would be flagged for particular grade bands and would require additional parental consent. And that is something we'll talk about in just a minute when we get to the other forms. So the next part goes into the terms and the definition, and it highlights the what the definition of a parent is, what the definition of a resident, a petitioner, and a library material is. So that outlines that in that next section. A section that we talked a lot about with Mrs. Hanson was about the parental rights regarding libraries. We all know that it's very important for parents to be the ultimate decision maker for their child, and that people's homes and views differ. And so we made sure to write this in here that our school district does support a parent's right to determine titles that are appropriate or inappropriate for their child to read. And so you'll see here in this part, it really emphasizes that, and this part really drives the rest of the forms that are to come and be discussed. And so it also talks about as titles that are flagged as mature will require parents to select a certain level of library access on the secondary library book access form, which we'll go over and talk about in a few minutes. So then it goes into on this form that, in this policy draft is the petitioner's responsibilities. If somebody objects to a book, that would be made in writing. Then at the bottom of page 1, it talks about the request for review and consideration. So in a minute, Dr. Johnson's going to talk about the specific material objection form and kind of where we're at with that. But that they would have to complete that objection form. And so it goes on to outline that process in here. And so knowing that local school boards establish a policy regarding challenges, it's also up to the board, and the board can choose to determine any guidelines to use within this policy. So this is some work I know that Mrs. Hanson had presented at the last, with the draft policy 2 of the community standards. And so that has been incorporated then into this draft policy. So you'll see here just underlined, the board-approved community standards are to help ensure that parents are able to make more fully informed decisions, so we go back to that informed consent, about what their student is reading and is considered appropriate by each parent. So again, emphasizing on that parental rights and informed consent. And so then you see here the list of the proposed the board-approved community standards, and those are listed below. Kind of moving on then, onto page 3. In the event that there would be a challenge received, of course we have the statutory compliance team. We have, first of all, what would happen is that the chief academic officer, along with the supervisor of instructional resources and the district media specialist, would pre-screen those requests, and we have a nice graphic that we're going to show you in a few minutes that kind of helps outline this process. But they would pre-screen those to look, does it violate 847? Is it meritless? Is it, they can apply the community standards to those. And if then that is the case, if there's a question about one of those books, then it would go on to the next committee, which would have 8 people. And something that Mrs. Hanson and we collaborated on was about having a more parent representation on the committee. And so you can see here that the proposal would be to have a representative, and we put may have a representative appointed from each school board member's district as a representative on that committee. So again, all that can be discussed. That was just something that was added. And so then, of course, going to number 3, they would review each submission, and then there would be the outcome. They would recommend immediate and permanent removal. They would reject or deny the request. They would use the board-approved community standards to see if we can return it to the collection. And then also in number 4, the chief academic officer would have that say as well about it being meritless or maybe a duplicate request or something like that. So in the event that an appeal is made, then we go into the appeals section on the bottom. And you see here, of course, that, and we'll have the graphic, which we'll help with this in a minute. So within 10 days, the petitioner shall file a request for appeal. And then that's when it will go to the board. And we took out some of the other language in there that was kind of the middle stuff. But if number 3, it's understood that the school board, the vote is not an endorsement of the particular book or the subject matter, but that law has been followed, that we followed the state statutes, and that all decisions of the board are final when it comes to that. So we're going to now move on to the specific material objection form draft, and Dr. Johnson is going to talk about this. That's the second document that's in your packet.
Good morning. The specific material objection form that you have before you is it is the form that the state requires. At this moment, we are able to change part 1 to reflect our policy and we're required to do that as well. So Part 1 is amended for our school board policy, and then Part 2, sections 1 through 4, they remain the same because that's what the state has dictated. However, and that's based on my last communication with the DOE. I've reached out to them and sent them a copy of this form just to make sure that this is what they're looking for, and that we as a district remain compliant.
Okay, so like Dr. Johnson said, our most recent communication with the DOE talks about how we can change section 1, but we are getting clarification and having further conversation about that. But what we were able to do in this is add in the proposed school board approved community standards. It's at the bottom of page 1 and the top of the back of the first page on the top of page 2 as well. So that adds that in there as an additional piece when somebody's making this objection.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
She's talking about part 1, not section 1?
Oh, I'm sorry, part 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, because section 1 has to do with,
And the state said part 1, right? Not section
Part
1.
1,
yes,
Part 1.
yes, thank you, Mrs. Hanson.
The first page and a half, 2 pages.
So this part 1 is what the state is saying based on our most recent communication that we can make changes to. Dr. Johnson we have an email communication with that, and then Dr. Johnson has sent in our form to just say, okay, does this work, or can we change some of the other, just for further clarification. But right now we're going on by what the most recent information. So the next paper that you have in your folder is the graphic, and I am super visual, so this helps me. Like I could read words all day, but when I see it in bubbles and different colors, that makes me just, okay, it all makes sense to me. So you can see here that if we have a complaint, the district preview committee, and that would include the chief academic officer, the supervisor of instructional resources, and the district library media specialist, so that would be that information, like I was saying before, they would look, okay, does it violate 847? Okay, yes, it's gone, right? No, okay. Then they can apply the board approved community standards. Okay, this list of things. They can deny as meritless, and we can probably all think of examples of those kinds of books, right? So like, they can look at all these things, these three things, right? And so they say, okay, we can deal with this, we can return it, we can remove, whatever we want to do with that. But then, if there's a question with one of those books, if there's an issue with one of these, well, obviously that one's automatically. Then we would go to the statutory compliance team for review. And that is those people that we talked about there. It would be 3 district people, and that would be, it could be a choice, like, so it would be like, for example, the chief academic officer, the district media specialist, and 2 media specialists, or would be the choice, or whatever. But 3 people, 3 of those. And then it would be a board-appointed parent, maybe, from each section. Because what we talked about was, maybe you don't have a parent that wanted to, do it from your particular region, or you had somebody else that you needed to, so we didn't want to write that in specifically, but of course you all can change that however you would like. So then that committee would look here, they would use the community standards, and they would remove, retain, or they would flag as mature for the parental advisory status. And so then that would go here, and then if somebody wants to make an appeal to that process, then they would send that to the superintendent's office. He would send a notice of board action for petitioner, and then the school board would do their part at that point following the procedures, and then the vote would be final of the school board. So, again, to me, a graphic. And I think, Mrs. Hanson, you had talked about that at the last meeting too. So I appreciate the graphic. like I said, if you're me, and now that we have Canva, it's amazing. We can do all kinds of fun things. So, okay. All right, so the next 2 forms, so we're emphasizing these are called book access level forms. And the next 2 forms talk about the varying level of access. And we know that there's differing needs of elementary versus secondary students. And so you can see here, and I'll start with the elementary one. At the bottom, you'll see the different number of access levels for the library selection. You'll see that there's general access. You see that we use the same language as we did when we talked about the book fairs
in here, both from a reading level and subject content. The appropriateness of individual titles are unique to a child's ability and family values. Books in the elementary library range from kindergarten through 6th grades and may contain content that's not appropriate for all ages. So we included that same language as what we worked on in when we talked about the book fair. And then the limited access would be, again, what parents can do. They can write a list of different topics or authors or titles that they would not like their child, or they can provide a list that they are allowed under the limited access, and then no access, they're prohibited from checking out books. Section 2, I always have to chuckle because the email notifications of checkouts. So last year, Mrs. Hanson, you talked about, like the rollout and that sort of thing. So as a parent last year, I don't know what I was filling out. I wrote my email down, and so now gladly every day at 4:30, I get my daily email report of what my child has checked out at Lakeside Junior High School. And I'm very happy about that, but I'm trying to figure out how to get off that list. Lakeside, let me know. But anyways, so I understand this and get this as a parent, but I can attest, it works. Because they get it every day, 4:30. So her dad's like, please don't write our emails on anything else. So anyway, so the section 2 talks about the email notifications. And so even though I was a parent and I said, okay, I want whatever kind of access, I can still write yes, I would like to get a daily email, or no, I don't want a daily email of what my kid. So I know next year, I think no. Okay, and so then, I'm not trying to persuade anybody one way or the other, I'm just saying. Okay, and then the secondary library book access level form also has the same sort of thing, but this is where we start talking about those parental advisory books, right, that we're flagged. And so those start to get into the different access here. So the general access, the unlimited access, and you can see the different pieces. The unlimited starts talking about the parental advisory, including those books that are flagged as a parental advisory. The limited access is the same as the elementary school, where they would have a list of not allowed versus allowed, and then no access. And then again, they have the email notification of checkouts as well on the bottom. So I know one of the big things that we've really talked about is the communicating that informed consent and level of access to parents. And so this is just examples here. Is basically the information that is in these forms on the flyers. So we just put it at the end as examples. Like, these can be changed. Again, all of this is just proposed and as a starting point for the discussion to happen. This can all be aligned to what's in those letters. So this can easily be changed. But this is something that we would really push out to parents and have like a big campaign about, like, look, these are your different options, and that sort of thing. They would have the information ahead of time. Also, I know that Ethan and his crew are working through Synergy and having the permissions at the beginning of the year pop up, like the health form and different things, that we have to give permission to as parents, and so they're working on that. Facebook, the website, Mrs. Hanson also mentioned, and it is a really cool little video through Escambia County does, that literally shows the, parents how to do it, how to get on, and how to access. And so I think with all of that and having a solid plan moving into the school year, we can really get this information out to parents so they're able to make that informed decision about their own child. So yeah, now that we have the screencastify, we can make a little video. So again, that's the information that's in the folder. And so again, I'll turn it over to you.
Can I, Ms. Skipper, can I clarify something before we go into this? Because there's a part of this that I need the board to understand real quick. Some of this is not what I've been working on for 6 months. As of yesterday, part of this is changed. Like, I left there at 12:30 yesterday. To be disappointed is an understatement. So on the policy, I went in knowing I would give up pretty much everything, but there was one thing I wouldn't give up. And that is because the will of this board last summer was to make sure that our parents had informed consent We voted on it, the district rolled it out. Haphazard as it was, when they had problems with it, they blamed the board. It was our idea to do this opt-in. But I have to tell you, although it was a wonderful experience working with these two ladies, what you have in front of you in this document, I just want to make sure you guys understand this, and this document is all opt-out. This is not informed consent. It's just not. At the secondary level, we voted on this last year. We talked about how parents need to know that there's material in the library not appropriate for their kids. We know that. I believe we've moved 300 titles of 847 as of right now. 300. That would be 300 pornography books per state statute. And I might be wrong about the number. Don't hold me, because I know how people do that. Don't hold me accountable for that. And we have removed books from elementary as well. So part of my give and take with the district yesterday was, first of all, I need you guys to know the second year that you roll into something, it's so much easier than the first year. And if we have safeguards to protect our media specialists and their time, then there's no reason why it shouldn't roll out again. Parents are expecting it. I agreed, although I don't agree, to use the same elementary levels as we did last year. This is an opt-out. Much to many of my friends' anger at me, they didn't want it. Well, my idea is that in elementary school, why would we want to put fear into like a kindergarten parents, for the first time kindergarten parent, that there's inappropriate material in their library? I agree that we needed to handle this in a very sensitive fashion. So elementary is the same as last year with clarification, not hard language, but clarification that there are things in this library too mature for your students. So we did that in a very nice way. I would say it's a very political way, because I'm not very political, and I would just tell them, hey man, we found porn books in your library. I didn't do that. I didn't ask for that. Most of the library is good. So for the board's understanding, this is an opt-out, and I know, Ms. Skipper, it's not your ideal thing, and we've talked about this at board meetings. When it gets to the secondary level, most of the books removed from Clay County schools came from secondary, not junior high, but high school. I'm not here to blame how they got there. I don't want to talk about why they shouldn't be there, blah, 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 right? We would be mistaken as a board not to make sure that every single one of our parents understands. We removed 300 847 books from this library, and there's more in there, and we don't know how many more. Number one was not my plan. This is an opt-out. My plan was to make it super easy using the power of technology for Media Center to manage this, so they wouldn't have to do any extra work. So synergy, technology could mix with Destiny, where they have a box. My other idea was we also upload every kid as a yes in the first 2 weeks of school. They're not in the library. We wait for parents to enter parent portal, see their video, and make their choices. Folks, informed consent means informed consent. It means we are telling them parental advisory books that do not violate statute but may contain content that is considered mature, such as profanity, obscene language, horror, violence, glorification of weapons, suicide, self-harm, mental illness, glorification of drugs, alcohol, and tobacco used by minors, gender theory, medical transitioning. Those are in our libraries. Do I want them all gone? No. Does a parent have the right to know they're there?
Isn't that what this form
No.
says?
Box number 1 loads everybody up as a yes. They do not. You do not have to have verification that a parent understands the policy. When I left there yesterday, we had unlimited, limited, and no access, with the hope that the county can use our millions and millions of dollars of technology to meld these things together. I would also say, people like to throw around lawsuits as words, but you let somebody's kid go into a library, pick up one of them books, and you find a parent who discovers that they're reading an 847 violation, that is where the lawsuit would happen. There's not many. We have a lot of titles. But to take our board vote and just throw it out as if we didn't talk about this last year, it takes a lot to make me mad. And I have to say right now, I'm sorry, I'm passionate, but I'm also infuriated that we went back to an opt-out, because that is not informed consent. It just isn't. And I need you guys to understand that. What you have for secondary, as we voted last summer, should be an opt-in so parents can say, you know what, I don't mind if my child sees all these real-life books. I do mind. I don't want them to see these titles, these kind of books. And I don't want my kid in the library at all. And we're telling them why, right here. Number one is an opt-out. Unlimited access, limited access, and no access is when we literally get proof that the parent understands what's in the library. That is a basic parental right, to understand what a public school system provides to their kids. And that's all I had to say about that.
I have a question. So, well, I have a couple questions that I'll just hit really fast and then we can, because I know this is gonna get crazy. So, first of all, okay, we know that parents don't always know the content. We figured that out with Scholastic. What I would like as a board member to do moving forward with all forms is utilize our technology. I know I've emphasized this kind of like the portable situation, you know, we kind of beat it on the head 1,000 times. I would like every form given to a parent to be electronic. And you know, I don't know, maybe it's just because of the doctor that I use, I'm not really sure, but before I can go to my doctor's appointment, all my forms are created online, right? You can access them online. A lot of times you can't even view your portal till you freaking sign the paper, right? So my thing is why can't we use a little special, I think they're called widgets, whatever, in technology world, to make it to where when you sign on to Synergy, you have a box that pops up and says, you have to complete these forms, whether it's your help form, whether it's this form, all of these forms. So everything's electronic so that you guys don't have much, if any, work to do because it's already done. It's electronic. All of our systems have talked to each other, which is exactly what I have been asking for all systems, not just this system. So getting everything to talk to each other gets a lot of work off of them, a lot of work off of everybody actually, because it's just the parent signing it. And then making it to where, I do like the suggestion where they're all uploaded. That way we don't have to worry about individual typing every single last one of them in, and utilizing it that way. Because I think a lot of this, aside from the rest of the drama, I feel like a lot of it is that we're just not using technology to work for us.
So we
And so,
got good news for you.
We're not.
okay, right, but hold on, I'm not done. So that is my first thing, and then you can address that. I would like to know from our lawyer, would these guidelines, community standards, community guidelines, if we were to vote on this policy, could we utilize this for future purchasing for our media specialists?
So Mr. Blocker, can I explain that part about the appendix?
Well, can you just answer
Well,
that?
he can explain what we're working on.
Okay, or that.
Yes,
I just need to know.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
If we voted on this,
Yes, ma'am.
could we allow them, could we unfreeze this purchasing and allow them to start purchasing?
Yes, ma'am. If the board finalizes this, then obviously there's some funding considerations, but yes.
Right,
We can,
okay.
but the state statute does allow the board to create a community standard. Generally, that was geared towards current content, but the board, sets policy and can work with the superintendent to do that, to direct that. The actual purchasing of the books is something the superintendent is responsible for, but the board can outline a community standard that they would like to use as a guide. So the only reason I hesitate, this is what, I'm going to give you a non-lawyerly answer. The answer to your question is yes. However, when the statute was written, It was specifically designed to address existing content in the schools. Obviously, it's evolving as it's rolled out throughout the districts. So some districts are absolutely using a community standard as a guide for purchasing.
Okay, that's what I want to know,
So
so
the
that
other
we
thing
can
about
get
the
them
purchasing,
purchased.
there is we kind of breezed over it and forgot to mention this, and it's so weird, because when you work on something, you forget other people weren't in the room, right? There is a rubric, it's a very well-defined rubric with examples and non-examples for every single category here.
Where is
And
that?
it will be part, the media specialist will be involved in the process of creating this finalized rubric, which would be used consistently from buying to talking to parents, to the challenge forms, to the special committee. It will be the rubric that is used across the board, because the only time you get in trouble is when you're deviating, if everybody's not doing the same thing. So if we're all using the same thing. So, Ms. Skipper, that part that you're addressing, can we use it? Absolutely, yes. I have developed one with the district, and I wrote all over it yesterday, and we decided we need some help. We need to get some valuable input from media specialists, perhaps, and parents or English teachers, people who read a lot, to develop one that can be used consistently across the board. And they added that language in the paragraph, see the appendage or appendix
In the procedures
in the
manual.
procedures manual. So it will be there for the purpose of buying, talking, deciding.
Okay, so that's what I want to, so I guess my question is, could that be something that we do immediately following this, or conjunction with it? Well, it can't be conjunction with this because this is already done, but immediately following it so that they can start purchasing books.
So a couple things if I could. So, the purpose of this is a starting point. Obviously the board sets the policy, so we brought this forward. So if there's been any changes, Ms. Hanson, the board has the right to change it back or do whatever you want related to it. We're just simply trying to figure out how to move forward in the process. When it comes to technology, I would say this, the goal is to do exactly what you described here. We have really a multitude of ones that will be part of our Synergy platform. We check in, that's what happens. You're going to choose your library access status. You're going to give permission to use the clinic or not use the clinic, right? There's 3 or 4 big ones that the state has pushed forward. They would be part of that sign-in process. I think eliminating some of the paperwork that can I get an amen?
Amen. And so for instance,
Eliminating some
the
of the
nurse's
paperwork.
card, right?
Right.
So as a teacher, this is kind of like them trying to track down media specialists, like media parent signatures. So as a teacher, you have a home room and you have these forms. And this is the whole idea behind what I'm saying here, using technology. You are literally responsible if you have 35 people in your homeroom and you don't get it back, you have to call them every day. You gotta call them every day to get that form back. It's like complete desperation as a homeroom teacher. You offer candy bars to everybody who brings it back. You send emails. You do whatever you can. It's like desperate, I need to get all mine back. And they announce teachers who get them all back, and it's like a really big deal. We shouldn't have to do that. It's a waste of teacher man hours.
So-
All of it's a waste, and he's talking about
So to answer your
that.
questions, yeah, that's the plan. When it comes to purchasing, having community guidelines would be a great start for purchasing, right? Because one of the challenges is, when you're talking about community standards, everybody's view of what's appropriate for their child is different. So if you go to purchase a book, and within the statute, the media specialist, the principal, the superintendent, and the board are named in the statute related to that process. So having a policy that stipulates what the community standard is, then in my mind provides direction for future purchases, because you're saying these are the books that we want, or these are some of the challenging topics that we don't want in there, which makes it difficult. Realize that even if you adopt a community standard, someone, and this is just totally normal, this is what happens because people are different, right? Someone will disagree with your community standard, or think they just don't agree with it, right? And so the board recognizes that. If the board codifies it in their board policy, it would seem to me that you're codifying that all those other books are books that you are saying we should purchase, right? So purchasing can begin after that. in regard to informed consent and the process, I was not in the meeting, but I just wanted to clarify, or maybe even ask a question, since, you know, I wasn't there, would be if a book is flagged as mature content and the child has no form, the parent hadn't filled it out, what happens?
So there would be, in the system, if the child brought it to the desk, right, and said, hey, I want to check out this book.
Check out this book.
Parental advisory book with a sticker on it. The media specialist or the tech who's trained would scan the book and up would pop like a little red box. In fact, somebody's made an example of it, of how they could do it in Destiny. So the red box would pop up and it would say, this is one of those books. The media specialist would see, oh, I don't have that level of access for this child, so you cannot check out this book until I contact your parent or whatever further steps would happen at that point. So it would trigger something in the system.
So that's what I thought was said a couple meetings ago. I wind up in,
Yes,
well, you know,
Well, what about the books we don't know about?
I think,
This is an opt-out, it's just not.
I was just trying to point out what happens if a person doesn't turn in a form, if they attempted to check out a book that's been identified, then additional parental communication is required in order to do that, so. Ms. Ball.
Clarification on the form and following up on the skipper's suggestion, which is totally great, having everything online. If a parent has to turn in a form if it's online, for them to get into the, I'm assuming, that then this is an
I would guess
assumption.
unless they didn't have synergy.
I would, but to get into the parent portal, before you can proceed this year, you have to complete the following questions. And it could be question about the health form, it could be question about, do you understand the license policy? Do you understand that whatever policies we ask them to fill out, which is a form? And in support of Ms. Hanson, yeah, we used to, the one form that I can think that may not be able to be on is the federal form that we all have to get filled out, probably still this year. But those forms are going to be required.
Yeah.
And if I get, as a secondary parent, and if I'm looking at these, okay, wait a second, general access, unlimited access, limited access, no access. So I'm looking at general access provides access to check out library books excluding titles flagged parental advisory status. So that's excluding those books, okay? Unlimited access says my kid can check out anything. They love horror books, so yeah, I want them to be able to check out horror books because by God, they're reading. And so I would check 2, unlimited access. And that's the end of my requirement then, is that correct?
Yes,
As
you
a
would just
parent.
pick, you would just pick
So I have
whichever one.
said my kid can check out anything. I'm assuming the percentages that I was hearing, the 60, 70%, those were the parents that opted in. Those are the parents that said unlimited access. I'm aware, having talked with a number of media specialists in the elementary grades, there were some parents who said, no access. My child cannot check out books. And in elementary school, that is a resource. Students go to the library as a resource once every 4 days, let's say, sometimes 5 days, depending on the schools. And I know that there were numerous phone calls made to those parents as well, who said no access, because in the past, those children had been checking out books. And all of a sudden, their parents said, no, can't check out any books. And the media specialists or assistants would call and say, are you sure this is what you want? But they would require a new form if there was a change in anything. So I know that, and in just talking with all levels in the schools, there's still plenty of usage of the libraries and they are checking out. But if it's reducing, because this is, and I guess this is where my confusion is coming in. This allows me as a parent, and I'm assuming it will be on Synergy for 2024. Can I assume that, Ethan?
Supposed to be.
Maybe? Hopefully. So on the parent portal, I can check in and it says, stop, you have to do your library question. So I do my library question, I want my child to have unlimited access. So technically, they're not touching anything. They don't have to deal with any paper.
That's the idea.
And it's opting in or out doesn't count anymore. Well,
You're at the book access level?
what I'm doing personally is what I'm choosing to do on my computer for my personal child, and I don't have to, and when it comes up and let's say they want to check out a Goosebumps book in 3rd grade, and oh my, is that considered horror? So it says, okay, well, your parent said that you don't get to read this because it's got horror in it, whatever. Or, yes, you can read this, no problem, because you have unlimited access.
So that's why our focus was on using the term book access level, to kind of go back to that informed
But
consent.
the problem is it's not informed consent unless you say, we have porn books in our library we haven't found yet. That's informed consent. This is not informed consent. I'm telling you, at high school, I taught 132 kids. 132 kids. Do you think the parents knew every single thing in my classroom rules that they signed? Do we really think that every single parent understands the myth? Are there bad books in there? Are there not bad books in there? There are books we have not found in our libraries. So Ms. Bold, I'm trying to help understand here. It'd be like someone giving you a blank piece of paper and you sign it. You would say, what am I signing for?
But I think it explains it on the
It
form.
explains it right
It tells
there.
you exactly what could be in the library.
No, not under general. Just
Under general access, it says, general access provides access to check out library books, excluding titles flagged parental advisory status.
But what about the ones that aren't flagged? What about all the stuff in our libraries that
We're going to have to
Never
take
should have
that
been bought.
chance. I'm sorry, but
Why?
I am, as a parent, I have said,
we're telling
I
parents
don't
take a
want that
chance?
to
Is that what you just
happen.
said?
I'm just saying,
Oh.
my child checks out a book, and oh my gosh, there's horror in that book. I'm gonna use the word horror because that's one of the
Community standards.
words, community standards. And I don't want, and oh my gosh, my daughter comes to me and shows me this book, and there's horror in it, and it was allowed to be checked out. Well, guess what? We just found the book that, yes, slipped through the cracks. Will a parent come to us and say, okay, I'm gonna sue you because there was horror in this book and you didn't let me know? Possibly.
No, that's.
Possibly.
That's
And
actually
then I would
distorting what
rather
this
take
is.
that
That's
chance.
distorting this, Ms. Bola.
I have a question
This says
about,
we just let the parents know there's a possibility, there's some books in there that are not appropriate. But we don't tell them your child has a chance, although it may be small, to check out a book we never should have bought that might be an 847 violation. That is informed consent. There's stuff in here you might not want your kid. And if they say yes, then they say yes. But we have to get their permission.
can I make
Yeah,
a suggestion? What if we just add sexual content to the unlimited
Well, so
access, that there may be sexual content? I don't,
So we just mirrored, when we wrote the list, we mirrored the community standards. So then you would look back to the community standards, and that would be something you would just want to add in there as well, and then it's reflected on every document.
okay.
So like in that list.
The other question I have about implementation, under the limited access, I love giving parents as much control of it as we can. Like, say for example, they have a problem with profanity and obscene language, but books on mental illness are okay. So if I wanted to differentiate that, it says that you'll attach a separate form. How would that work with synergy? Would that be that would be a separate?
That happens this year, right?
Yes, and so what they would do is they would have to provide a list to the librarian of their child's school.
Okay.
And it says that in both the flyer and the form itself.
So that would be a strictly paper document.
That would have to be, yes.
Are there many of those from this year?
I don't think we had many.
We had that option this year.
With limited consent, did you have many? No.
Okay. I just wondered if it would be worth our time. Like I know at home in our family for videos, we use an app called VidAngel, and it gives you like 300 plus things that you can screen for. It's very specific about, holding hands is okay, but kissing is not. If it demonstrates this word, that's okay, but this word is not okay. So I just wasn't sure if there's, not that we would want to get that specific, but if there's a way to add that into Synergy so it's not a separate form, but if it's not something that you're seeing a lot of, then.
And there's concern that, would we have them, would they even be able to write in the Synergy what they want to limit? Or would we have to have check boxes? Then I don't know if that would become more confusing.
Even if we just kept with the broader language that's in the policy of community standards, like the example I gave where books on mental illness are okay, but I don't want violence, or, you know what I mean?
And I don't know if that's something that we could do in Synergy. That would be a.
Well, limited access. I taught in elementary, parents don't know authors and titles they don't want their kids to read until they've read it. I mean, I don't know a single person even all my own kids when they read, I didn't know what the book was about till they read it. So limited access is almost, I think, useless in elementary, but if we like to keep it there just in case.
Well,
but they don't.
I would use that.
You would. I understand that.
And I don't think you can say that, every
But we
parent
can't
would
say,
use
I don't want my
something
kid to
or
read
not.
horror books. Our libraries aren't set up like that. That's the problem, until we start going through the descriptions, which are not accurate.
Well, there are different groups of books though that are real obvious. Goosebumps is real obvious. There were some Goosebumps books that I read that I was like, whoa, but kids love them, devour them, and it's like, everybody, and like I said, if my child was reading them, keep reading, enjoy. It's not keeping you up at night and have a good time. One of the other things that I liked about this, and when we first started getting into community standards, I was starting to get anxious because I am hesitant in the community standard side of things. I do not want to put any restrictions on books that are not, I just don't want to put restrictions on books, period. To assist in this, any challenge title that is found to contain subject matter or content that meets the criteria listed below would be flagged as mature. So we're talking current books. I have a question for the media specialist. Are you familiar with books that have excessive profanity, have horror, violence, glorification of weapons, glorification of suicide, self-harm, or mental illness, glorification of drug, alcohol, tobacco use by minors? Do you have access to anything that provides you those sorts of things to be able to flag those books? Just curious.
Just let you know, one thing, there is a difference between a book publisher and a book vendor. So the publishers are those people who are actually trying to make money off of the authors and their printed work. Our book vendors are who we use to purchase the books. The book vendors, primarily who we use, are Follett and Mackin. They're the largest ones out there for library bindings and things. They are coming to understand the issues that we are facing, not only in Florida, but across the nation. So they are starting to mark books as mature themed, which may or may not, I do not have a rubric on that, but it's the same topics, but they haven't shared the rubric as to what makes it a mature theme. But I feel like that's at least one step that is occurring right now that is trying to help all of us in this room make decisions. So that is something that you are going to have access to as well.
Most of us have been in our position for a while, so we do know our collection. Now, I am a big reader, and I've done this a long time, so I really know my collection, and I've read the majority of my books. Unfortunately, if you're going into a new library, you haven't. It would be lovely if we had time, maybe even in the summer, to go through some of the books that we are unsure of, or that, we don't have, and be able to pull them to look up the reviews, to see, because it could be, we purchased it, like some of the ones that were challenged, we might have purchased it because it went with a set. Right. And everybody was reading it, and we might have read the first one in the series, and it was perfectly fine, and we didn't realize in book 6 that there was a scene. because the books are this thick and we never got that far, okay? So that would be lovely if, that way we could double check our collection to make sure we're not gonna have those surprises that a kid's gonna return a book and it's going to have that sex scene that we didn't know was in there. But if we had time, we could do that. Now, it would be an issue with new librarians that they don't know their collection yet.
It's really not an issue if we start sharing titles we've read.
Yes.
It's not an issue if we have an open Google document like we used to, and one librarian read 300 books one summer and one read 2, but she can look at that one's list and go, okay, this person said they're good. These are all semantics that we have to figure out in the procedures manual, but I can tell you this, we opened up a new school, Spring Park, and then removed 200 books from it. You cannot trust vendors, period. They're all making money. Publishers, maybe more. Vendors, yes, too. And by the way, we did get in this mess because of vendors. I don't blame you guys at all. We got in this mess because someone sold us books they shouldn't have sold us to. And I just want to make sure we come back to that, because I don't care if they start going through them. The descriptions are wrong. They did that on purpose. They should have said this book has a lot of sex in it, but they didn't do that. They're liars and they're manipulators to make money. And our kids and our parents and us, you guys, the school board, the district, we were all duped. And here we are stuck with it now.
I opened up a library, and I know from the first day collection that was presented to me from various vendors, because I'm a huge reader, I caught several of them and I'm like, oh, I would never have that in elementary, oh my gosh. But again, I'm a big reader, so I knew that title.
But one thing, especially with a new collection like that, you're given the opportunity to see the book. Because obviously, when you're opening a new school with 11,000 titles, you can't review title by title, and you don't have the book in front of you. So that is offered by our vendors, that if something comes to our school and we physically read it, look at it, we can send it back.
And that's what we do with Spring.
Right, that's what happened with Spring Park.
I just wanted to say, when we go through our collection like right now, we may find a book that is not appropriate, that is in violation of the Florida state statute. It may have a lot of F words in it or something. That's not violation of the Florida state statute.
Right.
Okay?
847 is.
847, whatever the number is. Just this past month, in my library, I found 3 books that violated 847. What did I do with them?
They're there.
Okay. I weeded them out. I also looked to see if who else in the county had those books.
Yes, ma'am.
I contacted the librarians and said, hey, look at this book. I'm just saying I'm weeding it. And, so it's not like we're not being proactive. When we find something, we don't want those books in our library either. It's the questionable books that we want kids to have access to. If they're on level, we don't want 50 Shades of Grey in our libraries. But if they're on level for young adult, we want the kids to have access. And we believe that it's the parents' ultimate responsibility to see who's reading, what their kids are reading. But we are proactive,
And with the email option, they have the option of seeing what their kids are reading. If they check it out and they say, wait a second, my friend from church told me this is a problem, then they can also.
Madam Chair, if we could, just to kind of focus on the agenda, there's the question piece of this. Maybe it's appropriate, it's your decision. Maybe it's appropriate to do that piece now so we can kind of conclude the book.
So I do have several cards, but I still.
They seem to be asking questions anyway. That's why I'm thinking we might as well get that part over.
So do we want to skip over the cards and just take 3 questions normally?
I guess we could. All right, if the board's up to it.
Okay, all right.
Hey, can I just say, Ms. Collins, I appreciate this right here. This to be sent, if we're gonna send something out on paper, this is what I would like. This is what I mean by overwhelming. Yeah, you may annoy the heck out of a parent, but at least they can never say, you never told me.
Right.
Because I emailed you, you signed it, I sent you this pretty colorful paper. I've done all of the things, so I really do appreciate this greatly, actually. And I just really want to emphasize that all forms be electronic and then make it to where, hey, you can't look at your kid's grade, you can't do anything until you can't click off of this screen until you click this square.
Yep, that's the idea.
And Dr. Johnson put a lot of work into these things, Dr. Johnson.
Oh, sorry.
Too. No, we were both working on it. I just didn't want to steal all the credit. We did it together. We are a team.
Quick question.
Yes.
And these are the students I worry about. Parents that don't speak English, do we have the software?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm like looking at my IT guy. And these would reflect whatever was on the form. You know, these were just an example for you.
Right.
So, yes.
All right, so questions from the audience.
Okay, so my initial question, but then I developed a few more as I went along. First of all, I want to just stress like where we said parents' rights. You said you get emails and you're like, ugh, every day. If you get an email that says, Susie wants to check out Stephen King, you'd be like, what the heck, I'm gonna look that book up. So there's sort of that too, like a safeguard where if you're getting the email that says what the title is, as due diligence as a parent, I need to, if I'm concerned, look that up. So that was one of my things. Is that possible, like that's possible for you? You could see that before your kid could read the 800-page book.
Yes, I get it every day. In fact, it's not an ongoing joke since I've been involved.
So that was my other question. So my other IT question, sorry, because I'm married to an IT guy, he would not want me to ask this. So we can see if a kid has an allergy or if a kid is military or if a kid's ESE or whatever, there's a box in Synergy. For a teacher's perspective, not me, but as a teacher, if I want to take my class to the library, if George doesn't have a little icon, then I know his mom hasn't done this form yet. So I need to be cautious with him. Is that, a possibility? Also, that asthma inhaler looks a lot like a sock. It does. You don't know.
It does.
Okay, so yeah, if that would be maybe I don't know, that would be a good thing for, as a classroom teacher, if I had everyone with a little book, not a sock, a book that, hey, okay, they can go. I don't know if you want, never mind, I'm not gonna say that, like, color code the books if they're
They should talk to each
limitation
other,
or-
the forms and parent board.
interface with each other, the software should interface. All right, so now to my original question. Purchasing. I know that you mentioned the statute was for last year. That the statute, like the purchasing goes, the statute that was developed last year, I wrote that down. So my question is, if I have Percy Jackson and book 3 has just totally been trashed and destroyed or lost, I can't buy book 3 right now. Is it possible to buy replacement books of things that are already in our library?
But haven't
That are tied, like Harry Potter, I'm missing 2 Harry Potters, so I'm just like, well, you're gonna have to make that one up. Did Voldemort die? I don't know. So, if we could buy replacement books, that would be great. But I understand what you were saying, like that statute matches the money, so we can't buy new stuff because.
We can buy replacement stuff, we can also buy reference materials.
We're not allowed to buy replacement stuff right now. So I know you could.
He's trying to tell you that it's coming.
So once we get to that point, we can certainly do that. Reference material, material that's replacement for books that are not, that kind of thing.
Does the statute say they can't buy books? I thought they had to be trained in the library media specialist training. Does it say for 2 years they can't buy books?
No, it does not say.
That's something we decided. I just think they ought to be able to buy books. This is ridiculous. I'm looking at a group of people who care about kids. They're not gonna buy this.
They care about kids, but we also want to protect them.
Yeah, but they've been trained and they're professionals. I'm not sure why we're stuck on, why haven't they been able to do this? It's just, it's mind-blowing to me.
So are there other questions?
Oh, yeah.
You want to go down the line?
I just guessed, I'm sorry.
So I kind of gave, my name is Erin Crawford. I'm a first-year media specialist. And I'm at Lake Asbury Junior High. And I kind of gave a preface that I was going to have a small comment before I ask my questions, because my questions won't make sense without my comment. I'm a product of Clay County Schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. And upon graduating from Clay Virtual Academy in 2015, I went on to graduate summa cum laude
from UNF in 2018, and I will graduate with my master's degree from FSU in 2 months. And I currently have a 4.0 GPA, and I attribute all of that success to the education and the teachers that I had in Clay County. And I have the experience of teachers who taught me to love reading and how to write and how to communicate, both advocate for myself and advocate for others. But I also had teachers who knew at 3rd grade that I was reading at a 12th grade reading level, and they did not give me books that were 12th grade content, but they gave me books that challenged my vocabulary without tarnishing my innocence. And so my question for that is, how can we as teachers, as media specialists, continue to foster a love of learning, a love of literacy in younger generations with all of these barriers in place? And also, I know that some of my kids, they come to school to eat. They don't have parents that are home. So if we're expecting them to give, their parents to give, or responsible humans to give access for their libraries, even if mom and dad are working the night shifts and they're taking care of their younger siblings all the time, they're just coming to have a safe place at school, we are supposed to be the people that are there and caring for them. That they may not have the ability to go to a public library and check out books, but we can at least teach them about the content of books and have someone that's a responsible adult to communicate and say, hey, maybe you don't want to read this. And so where is, the second question of that is, where is the trust in us as the professionals in our job to label and or purchase books that are appropriate for our students, that challenge them and allow them to never stop learning, but we also keep them safe. At some point, where does the trust in us come back to us, that it's not, while we want to, make sure that we're in legal compliance, where is the trust for us that we're not going to willingly put pornography into the hands of children, but we may want to show them diverse stories and show them, or kids that come from broken homes, that there are books that represent them. So where is the trust in us that we know how to take care of our kids, or we wouldn't be in this position in the first place?
Exactly.
Any other?
Someone had asked a question. Oh God, I'm so sorry. The brain just stopped. One comment that Ms. Bola had made, and that Ms. Terode had commented on, is when we find stuff, we make the appropriate action. I had a ninth grader, bring me a book that only 2 of us had in our libraries, and he said, I don't want to get anybody into trouble, but what do we do with this? And it was 3 lines on 1 page, and yes, because of what it described, it violated 847. Had it been found yet? No. Can we, it was a Stephen King book?
Yep.
Yes, Stephen King is an adult novelist, we know that. But man, our kids can't get enough of it. And I looked at this book and I'm going, yeah, technically it violates 847. And I called Carol and I said, Carol, you're the only other one with this book. You might want to take a look at this page. And the kid said, I love the book, but is this going to get somebody into trouble? So our kids realize what's going on. And they realize what a predicament we could be in. So not only are we looking at our collections heavily to find books that wait a minute, when did I get this book? Maybe I better read this. So we are doing that. We are being proactive. But what's really surprising, so are our kids. So we are the professionals. We have had the training. We did the state training, as Ms. Gannon can attest. We haven't done this year's yet, but we did last year's when we were told to. But we're also under the same kinds of information on the outside that we have had for the last, for me, 37 years of reading publishers' reviews. And we're going, okay, that's book 4 in this series. That looks really good. Put that on the list. But one thing that Ms. Gannon told me recently was that a couple of our big vendors, like Follett and Mackin, if we order a book and we look at it and we realize, maybe this one should not have been on the list, even though the review said it was okay, they're taking them back and replacing them with other things. So they're trying to be proactive as well. But like Erin said, getting every parent to fill out a form, she's right, we have parents that we can't even get to come to conferences to talk about their child's academic status.
But even kids finding books is why I said we should at least inform the parents that they're there. That's, I mean, to me, that's a prime example. Nothing bad happened, but at least we could tell the parents there's a possibility they're going to discover something they might not want to read. That's called informed consent.
Why is that a big deal?
Yeah,
That's why I'm just kind of
I was
curious.
just gonna ask Mr. Blocker that same thing.
Yeah, could we do that? I mean, you know how you always have a disclaimer, tiny letters at the bottom of a whatever, you know, like, hey, you may have this. So you don't sue us, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes, ma'am, you absolutely can do a disclaimer, absolutely.
So-
I mean, there's some built-in, you know, as government, you have sovereign immunity, you can, you know, operate, you know, under the rule of law, there's an understanding that as government, you're going to, you know, operate in a certain way. You know, there's no way that you all as a board can account for every single situation, so that's why there's sovereign immunity, but building in disclaimers and understanding, you know, that way, you know, making sure that people have that.
I mean, doctor up the verbiage so that it's, I mean, you know, that it's pretty on paper, but you know what I mean, like, why is that? Can we just not do that? Can we agree that might
There's
be a
no
good
reason why
idea?
we can't inform parents, right? I mean,
It's not like it's not a bad idea, you know what I mean? Like letting a parent know, hey, if you have unlimited access, this may or may not happen, like the boys who open this up, because you might have that one parent
no, that's known books.
that would fly off at the handle, because they would come in and say, hey, you said you removed all 847, blah, 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 you know, like, now my kid's over here wanting to do experimental things because they read this book and blah, 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 you know?
Yes, ma'am, I think one of the, if you look at, I'm sorry, I took my glasses off, if you look on the second page of the policy, under community standards, you know, it says to assist in this, any challenge title that is found to contain, you know, the premise of it is you're gonna find, you know, just as was described by these, you know, ladies here, you know, a student described, is that correct? The student discovered this, brought it to his attention, so.
You put a Post-it note on the page.
There we go. So, absolutely, so a disclaimer can be put in here that it's possible that this could be discovered and.
Exactly.
Just like on the form, you know, that they're gonna sign, that's all, I think that's all Ms.
Exactly, I want them to know that their kid could find one.
under the general, or the general access.
Mr. Browski, did you have something to add?
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we could, just to kind of bring some structure to this, Ms. Kimbrell.
I'm sorry, I just have a clarifying question.
Sure.
So I had written down, and I've looked through, you know, the wonderful flow charts and the elementary book access level forms and secondary access level forms. And so is the default, my question is the default the general unlimited access form in elementary and the general access in secondary? Would the general default be access to the library without the form? And I'm speaking specifically of the kids who aren't going to return it, their parents aren't involved, and or they don't get on Synergy, they don't know what the grades are. Are we going to give them access to generally library, or are we still, is this still, in my reading of it, an opt-in for every student? And if they do not have this form signed by their parent, either electronically or by paper, then they would be prohibited from accessing library books and classroom libraries. Which is it? Is it opt-in or opt-out?
So as this stands, a kid would have access to a book if they didn't return anything, they would have the general access, they would not have access to the parental advisory
So
books.
1 is the default general access.
As it
without a form.
stands, but that's, again, that's board consensus and discussion.
But that, so just use an example, if I may use an example. I am a second grade student, but I want to read a fifth grade book. And, or I'll go even younger, first grade student. Most of our kindergarten and first grade students are directed, if I'm not mistaken, to a section of the library that's predominantly first and second kindergarten, whatever. But I go over to the older group and I pick out the book, whatever, and I want to read this book. Obviously, a media specialist is going to stop them, number one, and say, you realize that this is not in your reading level, and it's well above your reading level, and this is probably not the best choice for you. So let's say it's just in their reading level, but it's a Goosebumps book. Use that as an example. I don't know that this is the best book for you right now. Is that considered a parental
No,
choice?
it has to be identified and gone through the.
Excuse me.
the district.
So if that particular child could then check out that book?
Yes.
And the mom-
As it stands, yes.
As it stands, okay. If they can read it.
So if I could, you know, one of the things that has to happen in the process of making a policy, we have to come to the point of how to proceed forward, right, and the discussion for that. We heard a lot of great discussion, a lot of great input from folks. We do have the, I hate to be the taskmaster, but we do have a piece of paper with a proposed policy. Why don't we just take a look at it, kind of go through there, because we need direction, you know, on this, on how to move forward with this.
This is what we would put on the agenda, the white
Correct.
paper, right? Not
Correct.
the other papers.
Correct, so we're looking only at the one that says draft, and it says challenge material. So in order for us to move forward, if the board likes the way the policy is written here, we could then theoretically, I'm just throwing it out there, we could advertise the policy, and then wait the 28-day period, and then have the hearing for that. Remember, we're only voting on, we're only making consensus on the policy itself, on the one piece of paper that we have here. So the other part of that is embedded within here is the idea of access. And so I heard some discussion related to access. So it'd be great to have consensus related to access, because I believe that's part of this process. So the access piece of that has to do with, and the only thing that I heard as discussion points going back and forth was on the issue of general access. And what I heard, and if I'm not hearing correct, Sue says sometimes I don't hear when it's, no, I'm not going there. Right? So if we didn't, if I'm not hearing it correctly, it's just because I hadn't heard it correctly. I'm not trying to influence anything. I'm just simply trying to move it forward, you know, however the board wants to go. So with general access, that would be for a student, if a student did not turn in a form, its default is general access. But under general access, if a book is flagged or marked, then it requires parent permission in order to receive that book. You know, I heard discussion going back and forth related to this particular issue. We've heard everybody in it. But if you're like in me, if you put yourself in my shoes, ultimately somebody has to decide what wording goes on the piece of paper that people have to vote on. And so it's hard to get, you know, we want consensus in order to move forward. It makes no sense to bring a policy forward in which there's not consensus, right? That's kind of the start. So do I have consensus on the general access piece? Perhaps as a caveat to kind of bring it together, because I did hear some other thoughts on it, would be a stronger or more wording about the disclaimer piece.
Yes.
On what parental advisory is, so that we can feel like informed consent has been beefed up a little bit, or, you know, related to that. And that would address the concern that I heard from the one board member, but would also bring forth the idea that I heard from the whole peanut gallery related to this issue. Can we get consensus that that's the direction you would like for us to move? Because I'm simply here thinking, what's my next move? What do I do? Like, listening to all of this. So is there consensus that we want to move the policy forward?
Can I just say, I had them change a word yesterday, and it's wrong, it's my fault.
Okay.
It's the part, the parents will be appointed by each school board member. It needs to say will, because we are trying to have more non-district people in the meeting than we have district people in the meeting, so that parental representation piece. What I was saying, it doesn't necessarily have to be by the school board's member from their district, because we're elected by our constituents, and a school board member might want to pick somebody who represents their constituents versus, it could be, it could just be anybody, it doesn't have to be from your district.
Can you clarify that, because it says the parents will be appointed by each school board member and may be a representative from each school board member's district?
What does that mean to us? They may, can we pick one even if they're not? That's what I'm asking.
Our discussion yesterday was that you were concerned that a district might not be able to find someone within their district. However, there's a parent in another district that they might want to appoint.
So the word may is just that we could pick who we'd like, but it could be from their district. That's the way we're reading that?
May.
That's the way we're, may? That's what I said.
Does or does not have to come from your district?
Yes, okay. I just want to make sure, just make sure.
So,
May I go back to
Yes.
policy?
yes.
Very basic, petitioner's responsibilities. When we started this, I mean, we have been way too nice. I'm over it.
Preach on.
I'm going to be very brief. Let's add that they must read the book entirely.
Exactly.
We don't have that in here anywhere.
But we don't read them entirely to buy them, so.
But let's put that they should read the book. You can't go online and take a snippet from another county, from another state, and then present that in a challenge with one.
The state doesn't require that though on the form.
Because it's going to hurt their child.
It's not, they just have to provide proof. So if it's 847, you only need one sentence of proof. So that's not the same. I mean, I'm with you, like emotionally, but the state doesn't require that.
Gotcha.
Well, maybe we can.
So I
But if it violates 847.
Well, it's not, how can it violate? We're not gonna have more. I mean, if somebody's challenging a book, I wanna make sure that.
I mean, I get where you're coming from, I'm just saying, if it hasn't been pulled already and they challenge it as the 847.
That's right, because I'm trying to look at the other avenue we're dealing with.
So would you just want them to attest that they can read the book? Just check a box that
Yeah,
says
if it sounds like they haven't, we can't do it.
Okay, let's let Mr. Clark weigh in.
Mrs. Clark, my apologies, you and I did have a conversation about this. With the community standards, there may be some built-in for that, but the way the law was written, specifically to 847, the legislature specifically decided not to require that for the 847 pornography part. If y'all move forward with the community standards and there's a, let's say there's a disagreement, as an example, on here, glorifying, weapons, you can have, there's some examples here, but you can have some disagreement on that. That may be something that the board has some leeway in requiring, look, you gotta read the whole book and put it in within its context, but for 847 pornography, the legislature has decided that that will not be a requirement for pornography specifically. If there's the example that was used earlier, we have to pull the book. But for community standards, we could maybe, if there's a dispute or in the appeal process, if someone says, well, look, I think this glorifies, you have some book on general patent, well, I think this glorifies weapons. There could be some dispute about that. There could be some, well, have you read the whole book? Have we, so, and my apologies for not having a chance to clarify that beforehand, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about 847.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm talking about all these other needless challenges that we've had. And it's obvious, somebody hasn't read 2,000 books.
Yes, ma'am. So maybe as a possibility, what we can do, and I can work with the staff on this, maybe what we can do is modify for the petitioner's responsibility, bifurcate it where related to community standards, there is some good faith, check off that they've read the book, that in its entirety and put it all within context, maybe bifurcate it that way. If that's the will of the board, we can work with the staff and maybe kind of separate that, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, ladies?
Well, how does that apply to the state's form that we may or may not have to use word for word because they don't require
Well, I think it's my understanding with the state form, and I know we're getting some clarification on this, is that the first part of the form, so when this law was written, the legislature specifically left community standards undefined. They left that to school districts to clarify that. So the first part, in part one, really addresses more of the community standards. I think what they were trying to do, as I've read the minutes from the discussions, the legislature did not want leeway when it came to pornography. If it's obviously pornography. Now, as we know, the Supreme Court has said that it cannot identify pornography. It's up to the viewer, but the state of Florida has identified what they believe is pornography. So we do not necessarily have leeway. Now, we're getting some clarification because there are other school districts that...
I was referring to section 4. Ms. Clark, do you examine this material in its entirety, yes or no? Question number 2. So they already, I mean, anybody could just say yes, you could lie on it, but the state form actually makes them answer. And then if not, what sections did you examine? So for instance, in 847, if you just read page 10 and there was some really, involved things, you would just say, no, I stopped at page 10, it's in 847, right? I think that's what they're trying to do here.
Yes, ma'am, and I think that's consistent with the statute, because it's not requiring that they read, for 847 specifically, again, setting community standard, this is 847 specifically. The plain reading of this, to me, as one observer, would be, we're requiring, this is the state form, you're requiring whether they've read the whole thing, whether it's just a portion of it. But again, I think this would be separate from the community standard. I think y'all have some leeway to maybe have, hey, we've read the whole book or whatever, and we can work on that. I think
We've read the book. I think the district reads the whole book when we, right? Somebody will be reading the whole book.
So if I may, there's one more point I just need to make. There's one typo on the back part of the page under sorry.
Page 4, number 4.
Page 4. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Page 4, number 4. So on the very back it says under Florida Statute 286.0114. So this is the statute that codifies public comment, which in all government proceedings in the sunshine, so the no should be removed. Speakers shall be allowed to address the board. So speakers, when this board sits in a quasi-judicial matter, y'all are essentially the judge, the jury, and the decision maker. Based on that, you have to conduct it almost in a quasi-judicial proceeding. Y'all are sitting as judges in this proceeding. Obviously, in a court of law, we're not listening to public comment. However, public comment would still apply, so the public could still make a comment. Now, having said that, y'all's role in this process is simply to be the final decider of the process. So if there's a disagreement, y'all are not weighing in on the content. Y'all are not deciding what the content is. You are not making a decision whether you endorse or not endorse. You are simply looking at the process and making sure the process was followed. So as an example, there's, within 10 days or whatever the time frame, y'all are simply reviewing it. If someone says, hey, wait a minute, the school district did not properly process my petition or my complaint, all y'all are doing is essentially, as sitting in a judicial capacity, making a decision whether the process is followed correctly. So there are no endorsements. Y'all actually cannot, in that role, weigh in on the content. Now, having said that, the public can still stand up and say, look, we disagree. Just like any judicial case, I'm sure there's commentary on the judges and their decision-making, including the Supreme Court. So the public can certainly walk up and say, we disagree with your decision. We don't think the process is followed. I think what's important is to remind the public when we do this in sitting, we are saying y'all are not weighing in on the content. So we can have a little statement that's read into the record. This is purely, was the process followed correctly in a judicial capacity? Does that make sense? Because I think that's very important to make sure whatever process y'all decide on, procedurally we're following it correctly. So, thank you.
Well, I'm comfortable with moving forward.
Okay, so can I get consensus from the board to move forward? Like shake heads and...
Fixing this stuff that we just discussed.
Yeah, on this.
On the white paper?
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm good with that.
right, so the next item on our agenda is the 2024-2025 proposed allocations.
Oh, I'm excited about this, and media specialists, you can stay if you like. This is your chance to get out of town if you'd like. If you want to hear my presentation, you're more than welcome to. That's it for your portion.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Hey, and anyone's welcome to come visit me if you want. Why not?
Allocation package?
That one but should be.
Actually, I want to meet last week, but I can meet the 9 days.
Yes, are you talking about this? Yes, that will be. Yes, this will be online.
I got her.
Yes, Bonnie.
Well, I called her today, and
She will be able to come for sure, because she's the one that, that one was going to be online.
we can meet any day you want to meet. After you hear this, you say, I want to meet for
There we go.
days,
I know. Okay.
So you feel totally.
Got it. For the actual school board meeting, I'll be there.
All right, and I can share that. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you ready? Let's go. Let's get this thing going. All right, let's go. So I'm excited. I was excited about the book stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm even more excited about this stuff. So here we go. So the start of the 24-25 school year actually starts in December. For us at the district level, planning for next school year. Part of that process is the staff allocation package, which is in your booklet. You got 2 binders. One binder is the presentation that you're about to see, and the other binder is each and every position within Clay County Schools. So the intent of this today is to succinctly kind of point out the process that we went through. And while Bonnie's pulling this up, the goal of the presentation is to do 3 things. 1, to provide you with the guiding principles that were used in order to develop the allocation package that you're about to see. 2 is to describe for you how the allocations were determined, like how did we figure this out. And 3rd is the financial impact, which of course is the purview of the board. So there you are, that's everybody's name, nice. So in talking about what did we use, how did we come up with this, the very first thing I'd point out to you is stability. Clay County Schools is an organization of 5,000 people. It's the largest employer in Clay County. It's bigger than every other governmental agency added together. It's by 1,000, to give you an idea. So it's huge. It cannot be done in a short period of time. In order to have stability within our system and people that work for us, we go through a whole process to get to next school year. One is the allocation of positions, which happens in March after about a 3-month period to get to where we are today. I'm trying to condense things for you, and then after that, I'd be more than willing to meet with anybody for as long as it takes to go in depth, however deep you want to go into all of this. In April, we reappoint people to jobs. People have to know they got a job next year. That happens in April, okay? There are a couple mechanisms that we use in order to ensure that fiscally it works out. One is we don't reappoint first-year employees as well as administrators until June, right? In case something happens with the legislative session or something happens related to the allocations of these positions. So, people's lives are involved, so stability is a huge principle upon why we do the things we do and the timing of everything. The second thing is it's fiscally conservative. You have to be able to afford it, whatever it is. You have to balance the needs of students with what you can afford and how to achieve that objective. It's not as simple as I want more of these or I want less of these. That's kind of like, that's too simplistic. It's, if you were to talk to any person, do you need more social workers? Do you need more psychologists? Do you need more? They're going to obviously say yes for every single position in Clay County. That's impossible because financially we can't afford that, right? So it's a balancing act. It's fiscally conservative. This particular package you're about to see is about, $8 million less than last year. Okay, to give you a range of that. After careful analysis of each and every school, each and every position, the needs of each school, the needs of each department within the district, all of that is considered. It has to have flexibility. So let me just go on the record saying, will it be 100% correct at the start of the school year, next year in August? The answer is no, it will not. Okay? This is a fluid document. It's not written in stone. It's not on Mount Sinai. We're not saying this is it. Okay? You know that every month we bring allocations to you every month. You will see adjustments to this package, I'm sure, next month and the month after that, the month after that, because needs are constantly changing and they're constantly evaluated. So this is not like an end-all be-all, this particular allocation package. I would say it's the start, it's the baseline for what we do, and we make those adjustments as time goes on. How else do we make adjustments? We have 10-day counts. Do we move teachers at the beginning of the year? Yes, we move teachers based on need at that time. Perhaps the number of students that we thought were going to show up didn't show up, thus, or more showed up, right? Then you have to make these adjustments, which is why we have the 10-day count. We also have reserved teachers. There's 10 reserved spots built into the allocation package, because sometimes it is difficult to anticipate. For example, we look at the elementary level, we look at every teacher, we actually have a spreadsheet, teacher's name, grade level, how many students in there, how many are in the grade band, because class size is at the elementary level is K3 and 4-6 are two different bands that are calculated for class size. So we monitor all of that stuff in order to determine the allocation package and provide flexibility. And transparency is another key ingredient. We're giving you a book with every single position, every single dime that's spent on those positions is located within that book. One of the things that I always find very interesting is people always want to say, you know, we should audit that. The Clay County school system gets audited every year. Every year. It gets audited on our budget, we get audited on FTE, we get audited on operations. All of that is out there for anybody to see that they want to see, okay? So those are the basic principles that were used in order to develop this allocation package. So what do we do? First thing we did was we reviewed our strategic plan goals. You know that student success, talent recruitment, family and community engagement, safe and positive learning environment, fiscal and operational efficiency, all of those things are kind of considered in the process. Next, we review our current allocations. What allocations do we have? What have we seen as problem areas within our allocations this year in order to move forward? So you can see that we did that line by line. So I know that cabinet and school leaders don't like it, but it's very exciting. We sit at a table like this, you know, and we would have all of the division leaders sitting there, and we go line by line through this book that you have for each and every school. And do we have enough teachers based on class size, based on student population, based on growth within that area? All of that is analyzed over a period of months to produce the book that you see in front of you, right? So it's not like willy-nilly, let's take a guess and flip a coin and see what happens. So all of that occurs in the process. Then the next step is we analyze our current needs. And when it comes to current needs, I'm going to point out there's three major things that the board should be aware of. So I'm trying to provide you a big picture vision for this. There are three things that are different this year, okay, than previous years. One is ELL. So English language learners. You heard somebody mention today we have 1,400 English language learners. That is an increase, a significant increase of 30%. Right, so we have over 50 languages spoken within Clay County schools, and what the standard that the state and federal government has set for that, we want to make sure that we meet those standards related to the education of those students. So you're going to see later on in this package, you're going to see an ELL department, right, in which there's teachers that teach what's called ELD curriculum, English language development teachers involved. You're going to also see ELL facilitators, people facilitating the work. And in the past, I would say this, our system for how to educate these students was not as robust as it should have been. I'm just going to say it. It just wasn't. And so now we're attempting to make those corrective measures. Some districts in the state of Florida, Manatee is one that's thought of as a leader in this. We were far from being a leader in this, and we're moving closer towards that within the process. So you'll see ELL embedded in here and positions for that. It's important. Remember, we educate all students, regardless of their ability level, etc. Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that different funding? Do we get extra funding for that?
We do not get extra funding. However, we've used federal funding in which to pay for the majority of the additional costs in order to make that happen. And so you'll see on the allocation document the reduction of teachers within federal funding then going towards this particular mission involved. It's an area that much effort and many, many meetings have gone into how to develop a different program for students that are ELL. So within that, you're going to see all of those positions that are related to that particular mission, where there's direct instruction of at least 30 minutes a day with them in a classroom. You'd be happy to know it's not computer-based instruction as in a previous model. But if you don't, let's face it, if you don't know the language, it makes it more difficult to learn, and so creating that transition. So big changes when we analyzed what was happening in our district were ELL. The second has to do with ESE services. Okay, within ESE services, when we get to the page where it talks about reductions of allocations and addition of allocations, you're going to see a position that the board approved the job description on last month called an ESE site specialist. So in the past, and I would consider it to be an itinerant model. So you would have a staffing specialist that would come to a school, depending on the number of students at that school, would be there for 1 or 2 days a week. Then you might have behavior resource people that would come into a school for 1 or 2 days, right? And so it was a different person, different day kind of thing. This would then reorganize the allocations, pushing them more out in a schoolhouse model where there's individual site people responsible 5 days a week at that school. So no longer would folks be coming on an itinerant basis a couple days a week, be the same person every day. That provides consistency. It pushes more people out into schools to support the work at the school level. Now I say that, and one of the challenges with allocations is it's not official till after we do that. And so I know Dr. Sanders is probably over there sweating as to what I'm saying about it, right now, because this is a change. It's a change in the way we deliver services for students. I always operate under the preference, or the first question I ask is this good for kids? This will be better for kids, and we believe in the long run, based on consistent services for ESE. So that's a big change. So when we get to that page, you're going to see a lot of positions deleted, a lot of positions added, no additional people needed. It's reallocating people to a different job role to create consistency. It's a huge undertaking. I appreciate Dr. Sanders' leadership in doing this. It takes courage to want to change and improve services. So, translation, when you move cheese, sometimes, it comes with an adjustment period, right? But the first question is it good for kids? Is it good for the school? The answer is yes. So we're moving forward with that model. The third thing that you'd see is different is one that you already are aware of, which is the transition from the school board police to the sheriff's office. So you'll see a lot of deletion of officer positions because we're no longer needing those services. So this is the formal process by which that's done. I know the board made the decision months ago, but you might say, well, when do we actually vote on the people? Well, this is it. You're voting on people on the March board agenda. We also added guardians. Remember the discussion about adding guardians and doing that piece of it. So we'll have more discussion when we get to that piece of the pie. And then, of course, you adjust the staffing accordingly. We shifted based on increased enrollment, increased need, reallocate positions like I spoke of there. So when you look at, these are all the things that we use in consideration for the allocation model that you see here. Bonnie, could you show them the formula for school allocations? Oh, you're going off screen there, Bonnie.
No, I'm trying to get my PowerPoint to go down.
Push escape.
That's what I'm doing. Oh. There's no escaping this.
So while we're doing it, I'll just press on. In the back of your book,
Financial worksheet.
in the back of your book, there's two things. One, there's not only the financial worksheet, but prior to that, there's a model. So the staffing model that you see there looks like it says, there you go, it's up on the screen, it's in your book.
Thank you.
You might say, well, how do you know when to add a position? You can see that one there is the, I believe it's elementary, I can't see the top of it.
It is, yes, elementary.
Okay, then you have junior high and high school. So how do we decide how many teachers, how many guidance counselors, how many assistant principals, how many cafeteria workers are at that school? Well, it's based on population, and you can see the formula that's used in order to determine that. Bonnie, if you can go ahead and flip to the dates involved. So the dates involved, if you look up there, you probably can't see the whole thing, and I don't think this is in the book, but all you really need to know is that today's presentation is one step in a 3-month process to get us to this point. It's not like this just comes out of nowhere. We started in December and been working at it ever since, related to, Bonnie, you gotta go back to
What is the state deadline?
the state deadline for.
When you have to submit your allocations?
You don't have to submit the allocations, but you do have to submit your FTE projections to the state, and that just happened
That happens in January.
in mid-January, I think was the
For
deadline. So we have to look at, and the state gives you like 3 different models to choose from, and there's a formula that DOC uses in order to determine that. So here's what I've done for today. I've taken the book, and the book has all the schools, every position. I've kind of generalized it for elementary, junior high, high school, and alternative school. And I'm not going to read it to you, but you can see it, and it's there, all of the changes that you would see within the elementary rankings related to allocations. You can see a reduction of 7 basic teachers, all the way to the cafeteria workers. We've reduced 2 administrators, a nurse. All of this is based on either projection number of students or particular needs of a particular school. You can see the ELD teachers, the English Language Development teachers, added into that. You can see the officers being reduced. You can see the guardians being added. So the purpose of this slide is to take the 20 some elementary schools and say, okay, what are the changes that occurred within the elementary grade band, and put it on one slide. You can see that that's it's really not that much movement when you look at that and you look at it from a big picture. That's not much change. I know it might look like a bunch of change, but really not. The biggest thing being the addition of the ELD teachers. Junior high, you can see the same sort of thing with the financial impact. Now, junior high had an increase because because of their needs at the junior high level and the age of the student. So we generally take each grade band and we move it up one. The assumption is if you're in sixth grade, you're going to go on to seventh grade next year, etc. Kindergarten is very difficult to predict what the kindergarten number is, but the rest of it is pretty stable to predict the next year, how many students we're going to have in each particular grade band. So you can see the reduction of resource officers, etc., at the junior high level. You can see the same sort of thing, and I realize it's a lot to digest in a short period of time. I'm trying to give you the summary version of that. You can see the high school and its impact. Then you can see the alternative school and the impact on the alternative school. We just separated them out into 4 different categories. Then you can see the overall financial impact. So you're looking at an impact to the general fund of about $534,000 to the general fund. The millage, you're going to see a decrease, and in federal funds, because of the ELL teachers, you're going to see an increase in the federal funds. So general fund impact of $534,000. Last year's impact total with the opening of the new school and other stuff was almost just shy of $10 million. Total impact of all of this was like 1.4, almost 1.5, so a significant reduction in expansion of personnel. So we do the same sort of thing for the district. We go line by line, each person, what's needed in each particular area. And we go through it, and of course, all of this, position by position, is within the book. But you can see the school board, there's really no change. Superintendent's office, communication, no change. Remember, we kind of also, I would point out to you that we actually push our positions out to schools. The Facebook groups or street committees that think there's a lot of people that work in the district office, most of the people that work in the district office are here today. 92% of positions that are, quote, district are in schools. 8% are the people that you see and have contact with, around here. And it's not like it's a large group. Remember me making the point to you last year, just within communications, that we have Terry Dennis in communications, and I kind of pointed out to you the example of the Board of County Commissioner having five people for the Board of County Commissioners in the communications department. So one of the things that we're proud of, maybe we shouldn't be so proud of it, is that we do things on the cheap within the district. And if you don't believe so, just you look at the facilities that this is a nice renovated room. This used to be the print shop. It was for a long time. But if you take a look at the buildings and you look at the district, it is far from the Taj Mahal. And I always comment that I went from Oak Leaf High School to here. I went from a brand new building. I went from the penthouse, I was going to say to the outhouse, but to the courthouse, right? We do a great job, and Doc, is the CF no. She says no. She starts off, and I say, hey, you got to listen to the question first. And then she says no again, right? So we don't have money within the, quote, district office. So that's a misnomer. I will gladly advocate against that misnomer that people have related to that. So I wanted to show you something like for the district offices. This is a mental health resource mapping, because you're going to see that we are going to be adding some social workers and school counselors to meet the needs. So one of the things you do for each department is we analyze the need for each department if we're recommending a change. In the area of mental health, it's not important that you can kind of see that there's different schools, then you see different categories, and you see different green boxes. Where you see a green box is a person's name. There's a person in a green box, right? One of the things you have to do from a district perspective is you have to ensure equity of services among all of our schools. So we analyze for each particular mental health resource and for each particular school, is each school being covered correctly? And if not, then we either have to shift resources or we have to add resources. Another piece of the pie when it comes to allocations is what funding source it comes from. So mental health is a categorical fund related to mental health services. So the expectation from the state is that mental health funds are going to be used for mental health services for students. So one of the factors that may influence the addition of positions is if you're given additional funding for mental health, the expectation is you're going to have more people in mental health related to that. So when you look at the next page of the booklet, you can see within the climate and culture division, you can see adding a social worker, a school counselor, 2 school counselors, and a coordinator of mental health, all paid for through mental health dollars, okay?
You said this is based off of FTE too, or just to fill the position? Well, I guess I didn't ask that correctly. My question is like, why does one school have more than the other?
Well, it's also done by the number of referrals.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Okay.
So not within here, you can see there's the overall population of the students, but then there's mental health referrals. So if it's noticed that a student has a need for services, then there's a referral process, and then you have to divvy up resources based on who's got the most referrals to see the most children. So that's another piece of the analytics that's used.
Because I was just wondering why some high schools have like way more than others.
Well, then the community partnership is additional.
Well, in the case of mental health, you can see across the top, all the different categories. There's a lot of ways that we attempt to fill the gaps of mental health services.
And Mr. Brodsky, Laura is here. Did you want to, if
questions.
okay, I don't know if you wanted to fill in any, if there was any.
She's proud of her work, and so she's been a hungry.
Here, I'm all in.
So,
Ms. Skipper, if I could address one of her questions, some of the different resources is with our mental health clinicians, which we are, seeking to add to, we contract on the outside. So we contract with YCC, we contract with Clay Behavioral. So sometimes we contract in. So for like a high school, sometimes that is a better fit. But all of our secondary schools have a mental health clinician. Depending on the number of referrals, if we have more than a caseload, and I will tell you, one of my clinicians is seeing 148, and we are in February, almost the end of February, but up until now has seen 148.
I was just wondering why like Middleburg only had so much. Sorry.
bless you.
They have more.
You blew it away.
Well, and I get a screenshot on it, so I need to kind of say, I did a screenshot that we're not seeing all of Middleburg on there. More, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just
it was like a little
Like some
snapshot.
have 4, they have.
I was just trying to illustrate
They've got
the
more.
process
Yeah.
involved, and there's a whole analysis as to the number of referrals in order to provide the resources.
Okay, so based off of
Gotcha.
referrals, that's all I needed to know too. I just was curious.
So the next slide is on ESC. You can see a lot of movement within ESC, but you can see where we have the 36 school site specialists that are 10-month, 11-month, and 12 months. So you may ask, well, why 10, 11, 12? All of the current employees are in positions that are either 10 or 11 or 12 months. There's no removing of people or positions related to that. They're simply right-sized so that they're at the school for 5 days of service. So it's a very different model and very necessary. I will say as a principal, I've been a principal, a few times, and when somebody is there and they're only there for 1 day a week, and then somebody else is coming in, I'll just be honest with you, as a high school principal, I didn't even know when they were there. Like, is today their day? Like, I'm busy doing other stuff and there's stuff going on. So having one dedicated person for ESE services per school will be a tremendous benefit to the services of those students at that school. I will also say that if you are that one dedicated person, you're going to have to build capacity in other areas. You're going to have to learn some new things, right? Because now you're one person show, and so you're going to have to build capacity in certain areas that you haven't been before. So,
Do they all get one evenly, even though some schools have way more ESE needs?
we're all one per. Now we have
Because some
additional.
schools, it's gonna be a lot of work, and other schools, it's gonna be a little bit of work.
Go ahead.
Depending on the size of the school and the number of students who have IEPs at that school, there will be a little bit of a differentiated, like some of our very smallest schools might only get a half person, still a lot more than they're getting now. Right now, they're getting 1 day a week of a staffing specialist. Some of our largest schools might need 1.5. So the plan would be to
You
get
mean
some
largest by ESE
differentiated.
population?
Yes.
By ESE population, not by
Yes,
size?
yes.
So, some schools, we do have a couple schools that have less than 10 students versus big schools with a lot. Yeah, you're right. So that's
I know how many I had at McCray versus how many I would have at Swimming Penn, so.
So any other ESE questions?
Are we still one of the 2 counties nationwide for the military for ESE?
You know, I always hear that. I've never seen anything officially in writing, but it does,
Well, not supposed
it does seem that way, because our percentage of ESE students, 21.
We're about 21 now. That's including gifted though, so,
Okay.
which is considered ESE. I will say I've never seen anything in writing either, but we have had several of our military families tell us that there are 2 places they recommend if they have a student with autism specifically.
Let me just say this too, to talk about the work of ESE, because Doc does a great job. I just say Doc, and it's like everybody. Everybody's got a doctorate now, right? So it's like, Doc. Yeah. So even, tonight is our parent advisory council for ESE parents. A lot of effort, to Doc's credit, has gone forward within ESE. Let me also say this. Raising a child is challenging in today's world now. So raising a child and also having a disability on top of that creates even more challenge for families. And so the district consistently attempts to reach out. Now, does that always work out? Yeah, I always laugh, because when I'm around other people that do a business or that kind of thing, they'll say, well, that can't be that hard. Well, you try doing something with somebody else's child, right? This becomes an emotional thing, and sometimes common sense goes out the window, and you're trying to deal with other issues. So that her team over there really does an amazing job. The fact that I'm married to one of them has not influenced my decision. I'm telling you that. I'm just saying that. You know what I think of that woman. Okay, so you can see there within the Department of Elementary Ed. Now don't forget, within elementary ed, you have literacy, VPK, MTSS, and ELL. That's a lot that's under that division there. You see the 3.072 teaching positions, right? Do you see that? Let me explain what that is, because I don't know if we explained that last year. On the secondary level, one of the ways that you add teacher resources at the least amount of cost is a teacher can teach a 6th period. Most teachers teach 5 periods out of a 6-period day, right? And 1 period is their, quote, planning period. Well, in the secondary world, you have certification issues to deal with. Like, if I'm math certified, I can't teach a science class, right? There's different certifications. So the way that the district handles that is we then distribute out those positions, the .128 positions, to schools that are in need of 1 extra period of algebra, right? Well, how do you do that? You don't want to hire a whole teacher You want one extra period of algebra, so you're hiring one of the existing teachers to give up their planning period and teach one more period. So when we were talking about the guiding principle of flexibility in one of our 4 principles for this presentation, that's an example of that, right? That's how we maneuver. You can't just get an extra 10 kids and have 38 kids in algebra. And you say, what do? Well, you hire another teacher for 1 period and then shift the students over. So that's all done in the process there. And then you see the 10 teacher allocations.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are we, I don't know how to ask this. As far as like early literacy, I see that there's no change. Are we doing anything additional to, I know some of the stuff on the strategic plan,
Yes,
some of us have concerns about it. As far as helping our kids read, especially with early literacy, are we supplementing help within these like kindergarten, K-3 classes to do more small group or more help with early literacy at all?
So what we've done is, if you recall, last year and the year before, we actually formed a literacy department. Sad to say, but I guess I can say it, we didn't have a literacy department at all. So now Melanie MacGyver, as well as other resources, are now there to provide those resources for students. We also have been very strategic in adopting materials that focus on the science of reading. And you know that the legislature in the last legislative session actually put into law banning the use of 3Qing in teaching reading. So I feel like we're moving in the right direction when it comes to reading instruction. Our overall state ranking is 12. It's obviously an area that we need to improve in related to instruction. But to answer your question, yes, I feel like we're adopting the resources necessary in order to make that happen, no doubt.
So I understand what you're saying. There is one person that helps.
No, there's a department. One of the things that
department, but you said
one of the things that happens is part of that resource
right.
is through MTSS. We would identify which area of reading instruction the student is weak at, and then provide the resources to address that area. So if you think of reading if you think of teaching reading as an 8-part or 8 strands to reading, right? You have to have a way to diagnose which strand needs improvement, and then what resources do you use to address that strand. Once all 8 strands, and of course this is oversimplified, once all 8 strands are strong, then you have a solid reader there. So if that makes sense.
We have Ms. Tito here too, if you.
You want to add anything to that, Ms. Tito?
It's awesome.
It is. Aren't they
I will
awesome?
say, with MTSS, our multi-tiered system support, the last few years, we've been really putting together a stronger component that we can help articulate to schools on how to problem solve, identify needs. We have really rich decision trees, like Mr. Brodsky had spoken about, with as far as curriculum that we've vetted and put into play. I think obviously having more support is always beneficial, but I think one of the big pieces that we've really spent is really educating teachers and leaders on the science of reading, as well as like just getting them the right tools for their toolbox. But that's been a premise that we've really kind of tried to get in play. And really trying to use all the resources and supports we have in schools, whether it's the media specialist, resource teachers, our instructional assistants. One of the things the last few years is we have done some professional learning through Lexia, like the Letters program, which is really intensive, but it's like it can get your reading endorsement. But in addition, the state has also put out like micro-credentials that our teachers can take, as well as our assistants. So I know leaders have really worked to get their capacity up by doing the micro-credential professional learning. So, but yeah, that's been a lot of our premise, is just getting the right supports and right needs. And again, people's always great. I mean, it's just right now just trying to get people in their skill set.
And I will add that currently with the size of our teams, we have 12 people on our literacy team, and like, for example, in science, we just heard from Katie today, there's only 3, and that's K-12. And so our literacy department, it's an entire department.
And that's
for
evolved,
literacy.
so I'm glad you said that too, because that's
All
evolved
works
as well.
together, so there is existing, that team is already good.
And that's evolved as well, because originally, like Mr. Grosky said, 4 years ago, we didn't even have a literacy team. So with adding on a supervisor position, we also, now this year it's evolved to that we have like an early literacy specialist. We have a secondary specialist, especially those students that have those really big gaps, working through intensive reading. We also have one that works with our raised schools, raised meaning that they're having some underperforming in certain schools under the 41st Federal Index. So with that being said, we have these different individuals that we put into play to kind of hone in and focus on what those supports are. And Melanie McIver's come on board. She's done an amazing job of facilitating those. And then we have our curriculum coaches and specialists that work directly with teachers within schools to make sure that everything that we have aligns together, because sometimes you can have a lot of things, but if it doesn't all interconnect and it's not easy for them to access, then you got problems. So I'm glad you mentioned that as well.
Well, my question, I guess, I'm glad we have all the tools and we have all the upper people to utilize them and implement them. But what my question is one of the biggest concerns that some of these early literacy teachers were saying is, you know, in a class size, a large class size with kindergartners, especially, I feel like first grade is very crucial because that's kind of when they kind of get the concept of things. I'm living it. So they kind of get the concept of things, and now we're sounding things out and we're reading and whatnot. But I feel like the struggle with these early literacy teachers is there's not always, and I'm not just talking about ESE kids, this is just teaching reading all together. This is the help for everyone, is having that extra support at every school. I know that would be an overwhelming amount, whether it's just a couple of days a week, whatever, but having that extra person in these classrooms to assist in implementing these tools, implementing all of this, so that every child, I don't know if I'm making sense, but across the board, that it's not just ESE kids that are getting this extra help that are gonna eventually start soaring, but every kid, so that kid who isn't quite struggling, but then has that extra help, who is now can read on that 5th grade level, or, you know, whatever. I'm just saying, I feel like the emphasis on these K through 3, but mainly those core years where they're learning, that we have that extra help.
But isn't there,
in the class?
Isn't there also, I mean, when I was teaching ESE, I was also a kindergarten SIPS teacher.
Right.
We pull kids out of the regular class and we do small group instruction for phonics through SIPS program. Do we not still do that?
But that's for ESE, right?
SIPS is considered a tier 2 intervention for certain grade levels. So we do have a lot of our supports through our exceptional student education teachers. It takes different models and deliveries. A lot of them push in, some of them pull out.
But every student still gets it?
We have Title I facilitators and interventionists that support. What you're speaking about, and it makes complete sense, is really like interventionists, like supports within, you know, other, and again, that just takes funding and, you know, finding the right individuals and all of that. But, you know, we do utilize like I said, like our exceptional student educators, and then, you know, as well as supports with our classroom assistants and looking at like Title I supports as well. So really trying to maximize whatever resources we have there. And we just met with elementary leaders on Friday to kind of talk about different types of master scheduling and ideas to use as well.
So it's just a stroke of a pen to add these positions, correct?
I would say we try to maximize.
She went like this.
She started twitching too.
I'm just saying, I feel like that
But what you
streak
do
will help us.
is you try to also use classroom assistants in order to work a small group and do other instructional strategies within there. So I would say this, could we add more resources there? Of course, no matter how many resources we would add there, we could always add more to that. It's kind of like the never-ending kind of thing. What I would proudly say is that we've bumped a bunch of resources in this, because and I hate to say it this way, 3 through 6 was treated differently than K2 because 3 through 6 are assessed areas. But it would make sense to me that you gotta work on the foundation, which is K2, in order to have the success in 3, and so that model has been implemented over the past couple of years to work on that. I will also say that it's very difficult to build capacity, and that's where professional development and coaching comes in individuals that come from a non-education background and just have a love for kids and come into the classroom, and now you're a teacher, right? There's a bunch to learn in order to become proficient at it, and so that's another struggle that we had, and traditionally, there was probably more of those in that grade band. So that's a whole nother thing. Okay. Here's the ELL department. You can see that there's a whole department has now been formed with teachers, assistants, the whole shooting match. That's a big change for us.
Yeah.
So we went from really no program to now a full-fledged, program. It's a priority to be in compliance with both state and federal standards related to ELL services. A 30% increase. And I don't see that slowing down either. I will also say that we're working to improve funding streams so to answer the question you asked, is there additional money that comes with an ELL student? Yes, there is. In FTE world, there is. I don't believe that we were capturing every dollar that we needed to capture, and now there's mechanisms in place to ensure that we capture every dollar and ensure that we accurately reflect that. So this is a lot of work of a lot of people, and people non-traditional, like Kelly Watt, while being chief of staff, has kind of spearheaded this on the side. So we all have multiple things that we do. That's just a little sidelight that Kelly, it's a little side job, is to deal with all of that, as well as Ryan Whittison, Title I, as well as the rest of the cabinet too. So that's a major change. So again, 3 major changes. I would say ESE delivery model, ELL, and the police department, shift over. Okay, you can see the Title I changes there, and then the teachers that would then be used within our ELL department. You see the deletion of the SETNet person. You can see for operations, facility and planning division, having the supervisor, and doing an analysis of the work for that position. If you look at St. Johns County, as well as others, the amount of work that goes into that position, it's still, most of those folks' salary range is verging six figures for people that are planners, a director of planning, facility, and all of that. We're kind of getting off on the cheap, and I hope he's not watching right now, but the need to change that position is there. Here you can see the differences between the police department and safety and security. I kind of remind the board that safety and security is much more than just the officer in the school. That's like 1/6 of the actual things that happen within safety and security is the person with the gun that's there. So you can see that the chief of police currently is the director of safety and security. He serves as a dual role within that. So the removal of the chief of police requires us to have a director of operations, safety, and security. So you can see the changes that are recommended there, including the additional guardians that'll be involved.
And the lead guardian is, as we know it today, it's
Yes.
not like the air and vice guardian, it's
No.
what we have now. Okay.
Yep. And then for transportation, you can see the slight change there. They want to add 10 more bus monitors. He's done a great job out there, and just not enough people to fulfill the role is what it comes down to. Business affairs, I'll let Doc explain her department.
Okay, real quick, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of this change. Basically, what I've done is tried to do a reorganization of just one department. Well, let's go back. There's two changes that I'm focusing on. One is a reorganization of one section, one department, and then, of course, some oversight in another. Let's talk about the oversight of another. I'm just going to stand. Let's talk about the oversight of the department, which is the internal accounts. Recent activities has been brought to my attention that we need some really clear oversight in the activities that are going on at the school level. As you know, we have about 43 schools that manage internal accounts. Internal accounts are funds that come in from parents, from other organizations that really, you may not think it's a lot. But at the end of the year, in my financials, I'm transferring about over $2 million that I'm just sitting on, that's sitting at those schools. So you can tell there's a lot of activities, financial activities, cash handling that is going on in those accounts. And the oversight, I'm not saying that the schools are not doing a great job, but there needs to be some additional oversight. 2 years ago, GASB, which is the accounting organization that I follow the rules with, they came back and said that moving forward, school districts, school board, who is responsible for the internal accounts, is responsible for identifying those funds and monitoring those funds and reporting it on their financial statements. So with that, we have taken measures to ensure that we are reporting those activities. However, with the organization that we have right now, we have one person who manages all 43 schools. With that and the most recent activity, I believe that I need to add some additional oversight or additional positions. So with that, I am adding one internal account specialist who would be able to assist the coordinator at this time to provide oversight and training to the school bookkeepers in managing those funds. So that's the reason for that change that I am requesting. The other change, of course, is the restructuring of the employee benefits and risk management program. As you know, last year, the board made a decision to go from fully insured to self-insured. Since then, that was a whole new ballgame for us. I mean, we did not know what to truly expect, and we've gone through it for a year now. And what I've come to realize is that in the past, the fully insured program requires that the vendor handles all of the claims, handles all of the claims, the invoicing, the everything that goes through dealing with health insurance. Going to a self-insured program, we become that vendor. So we are now processing all those claims, we are processing all of the data that's flowing through. We're making sure that the employees are correctly identified, the families are getting the correct insurance. So, so there's a lot of background work that is needed. So even looking at that, I looked at what the department looked like, and it was really operating by itself. So, and then of course we also look at the other end, the risk management side, which when you look at it, it's sort of aligned in some way. Yes, the risk management do handle liability claims and of course workers' comp. Well, some of that is interrelated. So with that, I looked at the overall, how can I make this department function more efficiently? And looking at that, I decided that, okay, I am going to align with just with all my other departments as well. I'm going to request to add a supervisor of risk management and employee benefits. So I am combining those two departments into one. So we will have that oversight. I will delete the coordinator of health benefits. As you know, right now that position is vacant. So I'm hoping that I will be able to still fill that position, but I am downgrading that position to a coordinator too. So it would be the supervisor, and then the coordinator too will be overseeing the health part of it. And then, of course, I'm adding a risk management specialist to assist in the risk management stuff. Because really, we only have one person overseeing all of risk management. So that is really a lot of work that it entails, dealing with the liability cases and of course workers' comp. We have a huge, this year it just, I don't know what happened, it inflated this year. So we have a lot of claims that need to be taken care of. And with the insurance department, I am adding another insurance assistant. The reason I am doing that is I've realized that we have our retirees population, oh my goodness, that has increased significantly as well. And that is a separate management of that program because they're not really in our system yet. So having someone just to focus on trying to get those that area handled is going to be beneficial for the department. I am deleting the coordinator of one of risk management. So that's that one. The internal account specialist I did speak to you about. The delete of the 2 accounts payable assistant, and I'm adding the 2 account is a balance there because I'm trying to align the positions within that accounts payable division. You know, we've got too many different, they're doing the same job. So really, I'd like to just standardize the titles of some of our positions. So that's the reason for my overall business affairs reorganization of the department.
Great job. How do you, I'm not saying you don't need the help, but how do you, when you, like you have add 7, delete 4, which is a +3, how do you guys navigate the funds for that?
Yeah, so you look at the needs. So we do an overall budget analysis before we even start this process. We compare the House version of the proposal, which this is budget week right now in Tallahassee, the House and the Senate version. We also take a look at, we go back 5 years to look at the history of all those funding sources as to where they're going to be and the projected revenue that we're going to receive, as well as the projected cost of that.
Because in my mind, it's very simple with budgeting. If you add a couple $100,000, you have to get it from somewhere else. Is that the same process?
Yes, it is. So we look at what we project to be the revenue coming in. Then there's stopgaps that we use. So mechanisms that we would use in the budgeting process would be, we've certainly frozen positions and not hired into positions. We've done that before. We look for alternate ways to pay for positions. So for example, in the case of the health benefits, they can be funded through the insurance program, not out of general fund. So we're always looking for other sources other than general fund in which to pay for positions. So when you look at the ELL department, which is a huge undertaking, the majority of that cost has come out of federal funds through Title I, and the money's there. So
Does that take away from Title I? Like, are we taking people away from Title I?
No, so those federal programs have what's called rollover, which is unused funds. So that's another piece of the puzzle, would be how much rollover funds do you have within that account in order to pay for those funds. So when I looked at the whole ELL thing, because that's the most expensive piece of any of this by far, is ELL services. And finding a way to pay for that comes out of federal funds and not out of general funds is a blessing, because we actually have more federal funds to use for that process. So all of that is kind of factored into.
If you lose the federal funds, what happens? Or they switch?
There's rollover for those funds, so those funds would have rollover for this upcoming year, but each year, you have to look at the funding that you're gonna receive before you decide. It's kind of like before you go to buy a car, you have to know how much money you have, because that determines the...
Well, I guess I just wanted to know, like, if they decide to cut the funds, do we cut the positions?
So ones that are titled or grant funded, we would have to do that, or look for a way to reduce.
We would do a review of the positions, and really, in all of it, whether it's federal funds or not, we really take a look at where the needs are, and we move it. So with looking at mine, yes, it is gonna cost some, But what I did was I reduced some of the positions so that I can take some of the cost savings from there and apply it to the changes that I'm wanting to do. But to support what Mr. Brodsky is saying, I do want to say that before this document was actually presented to you, I did a preliminary budget, believe it or not, to say, can we afford the modifications that we're making? Even, we did meet several times and we looked at all of the different funding sources and tried to collaborate with those funding sources to ensure that it is legal, of course, to support those positions, as well as how can we infuse Title I, IDEA, Title II, General Fund, to balance the budget, to make this work. You know, so that went into the planning of all of this for the presentation.
Is that
That answered your question.
So I would say it's a long process. You guys get the half hour, but it's kind of like.
I used to do those.
It's like 3 months. It's like 3 months of work to get to today. Information services, no change. Human resources, they're deleting one position there, you do an analysis of, can you cut something? So there's the graph. 92% of quote district personnel are actually out in schools serving them. 8% are the folks that you see around us here today. I know that that's something that people will say, oh, you're top heavy or you got too many people or whatever. Try telling that to the 3 people that deal with book challenges in our district. The one person, that's the communications person, you just take a look at really, it's truly on the cheap, and I'll defend that, extremely vocally related to that, because I believe that wholeheartedly. So there's 9 days, just to kind of wrap this up, there's 9 days to the board meeting. I know I gave you the quick version. If you'd like to meet, be glad to meet with you for as long as it takes for you to feel comfortable. But I will insist that since this really deals with people and people's livelihoods, we should be ready when the board meeting starts. If not, I will make sure that I point that out, because I don't really like to or don't appreciate messing with people's employment. And so if there is a question, please bring it to me, or I'll meet for days. I love talking about this stuff. However long it takes for you to feel comfortable going into the board meeting. I'd also point out there's time restrictions here. April, we reappoint people, then we post positions, and it takes from April to August, especially in this work climate, to hire all of the people that we need. So it's not like we can mess around here with people's employment. So with that's it. Now, if I could, I'm going to take liberty, and since you don't like the agenda review piece anyway, there's only one thing I'm going to review. Yes. If you get a brief, okay, right? There will be the Neola contract will be placed on there, so you're going to see that we are actually voting on that in this board.
It wasn't attached here. What, do we know the price?
It is roughly 30 grand a year, 60 grand for 2-year contract.
Well, that's less than I heard it was.
It was in the body.
And there's a monthly, there's like a yearly fee after that.
It's not added.
And just for the board to clarify, if y'all approve this in March, if y'all approve this in March, then they would start the workshops with y'all in April. So, and they anticipate this process again, a number of days, we have to calendar some time, because they're gonna have their whole collaborative process. We would need to be prepared in April to work on that.
But you would be, obviously you would you be in the workshops with us?
Yes, ma'am, I'll be with y'all, Mr. Brodsky.
Okay, I didn't know.
So the superintendent will designate a couple of people, himself included, I'm assuming, and then with y'all's on board, then I'll be there as well. So we'll all work collaboratively through this process. But they have some preliminary training they want to kind of pull us all into and kind of get a feel for, because it's localized to each county and district, and they try to flavor it based on, there's some things the law can't change, but we can, it's y'all's policy and so forth,
So 2 years for 30,000, is that what you?
60 to 30,000 a year.
Oh, okay.
That's for the initial development period.
It's not online.
Try it again, because it gives
2
you
years.
the 60,000 payable in 8 payments, over a 24-month period.
There you
And
go.
then it does add a couple of extra fees to it, but they're
They're not.
And this is outside my lane, but I do have some experience working with Neola. I would recommend considering the 2-year, just because we're really looking at potentially a 2-year process. Just because there are a number of policies, and we have policies that you all have identified that maybe we need to bring forth as well. So there's over 800 policies in their repository. Well, we don't have 800 policies. We don't necessarily need that many, but I mean, it's really a 2-year process. So I would encourage y'all to consider that, so.
And then after that, once it's all development, then there's like periodic updates that they bring forth when legislation changes, et cetera, et cetera.
That's what I think is awesome. And they said that there were, 80-some
So
updates last year alone
123
that we went
new
through,
laws last
and we were doing all of that, yeah.
Okay.
That's the only kind.
So I think that's the only thing, the other thing I call attention to is within the personal consent agenda would be job descriptions, because one of the things that has to happen, and March is kind of a special month because of the time frame of March allocations, reappointments in April, posting jobs, and then hiring people until August, if you look at it that way. So the new job descriptions for any of the positions would be on there also. Traditionally, I like to do it separated, right? 1 month to the next month, but because of the timing of posting jobs in April, they're all together on the same agenda. So if there is any questions, I'll help shepherd the board through the process to make sure that we're legally compliant with that.
All right, I did have a couple of yellow cards, but I think Ms. Kidwell, you're the only one standing.
I asked my question, it was clarification on that.
Anything further from you, Mr. Brown?
No, I appreciate the conversation on books. I know that that's a challenge, and I know that great discussion here today. I feel like there's a little bit of consensus. I appreciate the work of Ms. Hanson and Ms. Collins and Ms. Johnson in doing that. I was in one of those meetings, and then I think there was a couple others that I wasn't in. But no matter what you do for that policy, 100% of people are not going to like it. It's one of those, we just have to accept, that fact and move forward.
Anything from you, Mr. Blocker?
No, I was just, again, thank you for the board's patience. Thank you, Mrs. Hanson, our staff who worked so hard on that with Mrs. Hanson. Thank y'all for your patience in this process and direction.
Board member comments. Would anybody like to begin, or anybody have anything to add?
I want to ask, at what point, I guess, can we start focusing on, or can we do for media specialists to start purchasing again?
Yes, once the board, I think the direction of having clear community standards for which them to purchase, certainly the purchasing of resource materials and replacement books would make sense, because there's no risk involved in that. The community standards then would then be the guide for purchasing books.
So is that something that we have to advertise?
No, we can do that. We can do in my view, just to ensure the safety of the district, buying replacement books and buying resource material, things that aren't controversial at all. We could start that immediately. The ones where there's the actual purchasing the books, and I was glad to hear the media specialist kind of explain. And I think Ms. Hanson alluded to is that sometimes people are duped, or they buy a set of books, and it's hard to do that. So in order to protect the district, the community guidelines would be in place as the policy by which we would purchase books. That would make sense and would be in writing and codified for those individuals. Even when they buy books, let's pretend they buy 100. Boy, they're put in a very difficult, space on what potentially might be in it. They're not going to read every page of the 100 books. I think that would be unreasonable to expect them to do that. So we want to make sure that there's every precaution in place. Because to me, if we wind up purchasing things after all of this that are inappropriate, that's kind of hard to explain. Like we can explain how the very first book that was brought up was a 2005 book that was checked out like 4 times in 15 years, right? You can kind of explain that away. But if you start to purchase things, that's kind of difficult to explain to people, like, how did that happen? Now with all of the heightened awareness to it, well, you can see how if there's not control in place, though, it could potentially happen, right? You know, it's because of the difficulty involved. So the answer to the question is yes, we can start on those things first. Then the community standard piece will be later on, once it's approved by the board.
I mean, we literally haven't identified how many books are in there either, so I'm glad we start with replacement and then your nonfiction or college prep books, because moving forward from there, we don't know.
Exactly.
But that's what I'm talking about, as far as the community standard. Is that what we vote on for this policy? Can we implement? Do we have to, or do we have to do a separate one, advertise, vote, all that? I guess you didn't understand.
So,
Okay.
Administrator, if I could, the rough, like the very vague community standards, I'll call them that are have been translated, moved into a much more complicated, yes, Ms. Collins, a much more complicated rubric that needs some work to refine it, to make sure we don't trap ourselves or leave ourselves too loose, I guess.
But do we vote on that?
That will be part of the procedures manual, and we will approve that, yes.
Okay, that's what I just want to know, like, our timeline on when they can start purchasing, because it.
Well, and I think Mr. Brodsky's point was, is having the community standards piece will affect how many books they can adopt, because they will have to screen.
But we can start the process.
Right, okay.
The other stuff.
That was my question.
Because for 2 years, we've been trying to do that, make it to revision.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I want to get like a pinned down time, but I want to not like talk about it, I want to kind of get pinned down. Let's get it
Well, if we
done.
advertise
By
that in May,
August, they can be purchasing
the
books. if
community
not
standards will
before.
be approved at the May
Correct.
board meeting, and they can hopefully get some of that work done before summer.
Okay, that's fine.
Anything further? All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Mr. Butler, I have one quick question.
Since you asked me 2 o'clock. Okay, everyone gets a 30-minute.
Very short.
Oh, yes, yes.
This is getting better.
I think everyone will.
Hey, how?